Good
Okay.
evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, June 9th. It's 7:01 p.m. And let's get started. Chris, take it away.
Okay. The following meeting is being conducted by electronic means in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, amended 2020, which explicitly permits a public body to conduct meetings electronically during a state of emergency. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Coaster and the Asbury Park Press. All notices are on file with the Board Secretary. In addition, a notice regarding this virtual meeting and instructions were published in the Asbury Park Press and the City of Asbury Park website. A copy of that notice is on file with the Board Secretary as well. The notices and the conduct of this meeting are in accordance with the guidelines for virtual meetings issued by the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. Please note, all microphones of public users are muted until the public question and comment sessions. When the public question or comment session is open, you must raise your hand by clicking on the icon on a computer or dialing *9 on a telephone. When it is your turn to speak, your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number will be called. Your microphone will then be unmuted. If at any time during your question you are deemed to be out of line or topic, we reserve the right to mute your microphone and will make an announcement that this has occurred. Please turn off all cell phones and electronic devices during the meeting. If you will have a background noise during the meeting, please mute yourself. Please identify yourself before you speak at all times, as some attendees are attending by telephone only. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to you via Asbury Park APTV. Irina, please call us to order.
Irina, excuse me, it's Jack. Was that garbled? Christopher's, are you picking that up properly? Because I could hardly hear him. It was very garbled.
Oh, hold on for a second. Maybe I can fix it.
Yeah, I got a lot of static.
Yeah, broken up.
Yeah, it was gargled on my end too.
Yeah,
Same here.
Should I reread it? Is that better?
I mean,
yeah, that's perfect. Irina, do you think you picked it up?
I got some static also. So if you don't mind, Chris, just reading once again.
Okay.
Thank you.
The following meeting is being conducted by electronic means in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, amended for 2020, which explicitly permits a public body to conduct meetings electronically during a state of emergency. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Coaster and the Asbury Park Press. All notices are on file with the Board Secretary. In addition, a notice regarding this virtual meeting and instructions were published in the Asbury Park Press and the City of Asbury Park website.
Chris,
Yes.
sorry, we're getting some interruption again. Can you try hardwiring your
speaking
router
has-
to your computer?
You are muted. Press Alt. Is that better?
Let's just try it again. So I think you stopped at the notice has been provided to the Coaster and Asbury Park Press.
All notices are on file with the Board Secretary. In addition, a notice regarding this virtual meeting instructions were published in the Asbury Park Press and the City of Asbury Park website. A copy of that notice is on file with the Board Secretary. The notices and the conduct of this meeting are in accordance with the guidelines for virtual meetings issued by the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. Please note, all microphones of public users are muted until the public question and comment sections. When the public question or comment session is open, you must raise your hand by clicking on the icon on a computer or dialing *9 on a telephone. When it is your turn to speak, your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number will be called. Your microphone will then be unmuted. If at any time during your question you're deemed to be out of line or topic, We reserve the right to mute your microphone and will make an announcement that this has occurred. Please turn off all cell phones and electronic devices during the meeting. Please identify, if you have any background noise during the meeting, please mute yourself. Please identify yourself before you speak at all times, or as some attendees are attending by telephone only. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to view via Asbury Park TV or APTV. Is that better?
Yes, from my end it is.
Yes,
Okay.
that was much better. I think we got it.
Okay.
Okay,
Irina,
great.
please
So
call us
now,
to order.
thank you. I will now take roll. And Christopher Avalone,
Here.
Russell Lewis,
Here.
Daniel Harris is absent. Brittany Ashman,
Here.
Christopher Gonzalez,
Here.
Jill Potter,
Here.
Tim Slick, Catherine Minervini,
Here.
and Bonnie Natch.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. As I was recused from the last meeting, I believe I need a motion for the approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of May 26, 2020.
And I'll second.
Wonderful. And I just want to point out that the minutes of May 26, 2020 are marked into exhibit as BB1 as shown on the screen. I have a motion by Russell Lewis and a second, excuse me, by Brittany Ashman. All in favor and eligible to vote, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. Meeting minutes memorialized.
And as I'm recused by this application, 1302 Madison, I need a motion to carry that.
I will make a motion to carry 1302 Madison LLC to June 23, 2020 without further notice.
And I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Russell Lewis and a second by Brittany Ashman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. Application carried to June 23, 2020 without further notice.
And for the record, the chairman did not participate in that vote.
I did not.
Correct. Okay.
All right, so 405 Sewell, block 3202, lot 9, 407, 409 Sewell Avenue, site plan and use variance. Mr. Siegel and Mr. Karras.
If I may beforehand, let me interject that I've reviewed the notices, service of the notices and et cetera. All were in proper order and the board has jurisdiction to proceed with this application this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Serpico. Let's proceed, Mr. Karras. It's your show.
Thank you.
Welcome
Andrew,
back, by the way. It's been a long time.
It has been. Glad to see everybody and glad to see everybody is doing well and safe and healthy. Andrew Karras, we have the co-applicants. There are two applicants on this matter, 405 Seawall LLC and 407 Seawall LLC. There's a little bit of history involved with this application. There are two lots that we're talking about. It's block 3202, lots 9 and 10. On one particular lot, on the 407, 409 lot, is a multi-family building with 20 units. On the adjacent lot is a 4,500 square foot adjacent lot is a vacant property. The one multifamily building has 10,000 square feet. Previously, we were before the board, we increased the number of the units from 19 to 20, and there was a determination by the board that the increase in the number of units was not an expansion that required a D2 variance. The other lot, and that was on, again, the one lot with the multifamily building. The other lot, which is the vacant lot, had been in the scattered site redevelopment plan. We had to go for a plan amendment to get it removed to come back before the board for tonight's application. Both lots are within the PO zone. What we are looking to do this application is to merge the lots There is no parking on site. We are looking to create a parking lot for use for the multifamily building, to create 12 parking spaces for that particular building. With that would be a merger of the two lots. With that being said, I have 3 witnesses I'm going to call tonight. My architect, Michael Savarese. We have also our engineer, Joe Kachuba. And lastly, I have Mr. Roberts, who is our planner, David Roberts. Our planner provide the planning testimony, seeing that it is a D variance expansion of a non-conforming use. With that being said, I think we can get right into the application and call Mr. Savarese to testify.
If I may, pardon the interruption.
Yes.
Irina, do we have the resolution marked as an exhibit from the prior action of the board? So we have that in the record?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what it is, the exhibit identification or identifier?
Yes, just one moment, please.
Pardon me.
That is exhibit A4. Let me,
Okay.
and I'm going to cast it to the screen, just one moment.
Thank you.
Are we marking that today's date, A4?
Yes.
Sir. It's pre-marked.
Okay, it's pre-marked. And that's the resolution which signed by Irina on August 6th of 2019. Okay, great. Thank you. And if I may, I'll have my professional staff sworn in case they engage in any discussions with any of your witnesses, so they're pre-sworn. Jason, Doug, and Donna, please raise your right hands. You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Donna?
I do.
Okay. Please state your names and your affiliation with the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Donna Miller, board planner.
Jason Fitchter, board engineer.
Doug Cleland, board engineer.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andy, it's yours.
Thank you. You going to swear in Mr. Savarese?
Yes, Michael, where are you? Up in the right-hand corner with the giant shirt. Okay. Solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay, please state your name for the record, and please spell your last name for us.
Savarese.
Thank you.
Office at 34 Sycamore Avenue, Little Silver, New Jersey.
Okay, thanks.
And
Mr.
as you have been with the previous application before, Mr. Savarese, we don't need to hear your credentials again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Savarese, you're familiar with this application, am I correct?
Yes, I am.
And as indicated, you had testified previously with regard to the initial application that was before the board relative to the amount of units that are in the building, correct?
Correct.
You prepared a plan relative for a preliminary final major site plan for which we're here tonight, am I correct?
Yes.
And that, I believe, Irina, that was marked as A1, correct? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's A1.
Yes, correct.
Mr. Savarese, if we can take a look at what's been marked as A1 for identification, and why don't we pull that up on the screen? Okay. Do you have the plan, Mike?
Hold on. I'm just going to go get it. They were in front of it.
Here we go.
You have it?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. What I'm going to do is have you take a look at what's been marked as A1, go through the site and the work that is being proposed with regard to this building and on the site.
Hold on 1 second. I got people in the way of my arrows. Okay, so just to summarize the configuration of the building, originally there was 4 3-bedrooms, there was 6 2-bedrooms, and 9 1-bedroom, which is a total of 19 units. The proposed now is to have 0 3-bedrooms, 10 2-bedrooms, and 10 2-bedrooms with a total of 20 units.
And that was already approved by
That's
the
already
resolution
approved.
last time,
And
correct?
yes, and this renovation also puts 5 handicap accessible units on the first floor. This project has a lift going in the first floor to make it accessible to the outside and a ramp on the outside.
And with regard to the exterior of the building, what is being proposed on the exterior in terms of doors, windows, upgrading the building?
Okay, all the windows are being upgraded to energy efficient windows. We're introducing back to where there used to be doors on the balconies that are shown on the sheet that I have in front of you. If I can get a little bit smaller for you. We're repointing the brick, replacing all the windows, adding the ramp, bringing the building back up to the characteristic it was back in the day it was built. And
So when you look at this building, it had been a beautiful building, a historic, beautiful building. Am I correct?
yes, it does.
And you're bringing it back by the work that's being proposed. You're bringing it back to the way it had been, in the sense of past glory. Am I correct?
Exactly. What we're doing is obviously we're adding the ramps and the lift for ADA accessibility, and all the units are becoming, 2010, 2020 units that have, correct sized bathrooms, correct sized kitchens, and living rooms, and living quarters, making sure all the bedrooms have egress windows. So it's substantially upgraded inside the building with keeping the structure the way it is for the most part.
Okay. Now, in terms of mechanicals for the building, where are those going to be located?
They're going to be located on the roof, not visible to the street. And you can see them right here. I guess they'll be on the, the northeast, the southeast corner of the building.
All right, and there's a parapet that runs around that roof. Am I correct?
Yes, there is, and you can see that it's about 4 feet high.
And is that parapet going to be sufficient to screen those rooftop mechanical units?
Yes, it is.
And with that, that's the extent in terms of the renovations to the building. Am I correct?
Correct. We're repointing and repodging the back of the building. That's the full extent of it.
All right.
Is there work going on right now, Mr. Severis?
I believe there's a demolition permit that's opened. I haven't been in the building in quite some time, so I think you should ask the owner that question.
So the questions I have for Mr. Severis.
Where is the refuse going to go right now? Do you know, Mr. Severis?
Yes, it's going in the cellar area, and we have, per your comments on the last meeting, we brought the mailboxes inside to the first floor by the stair. You can see right here.
So how will the DPW access, or the garbage trucks access the garbage?
I can have Mr. Siegel take care of that. Similar to the many other buildings he has in Asbury Park, he has personnel that maintains the buildings. He would bring those out.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Severis. I will ask each board member if they have any questions for Mr. Severis. And I'll take it one at a time so that we cover everybody. Russell Lewis.
I do not, thank you.
Brittany Ashman.
I do not, but thanks.
Jill Potter.
No questions, thank you.
Chris Gonzalez.
Yes, I have one question. I don't recall if the building is occupied right now or it's completely empty.
I don't know that question. That's a question for Peter.
I believe it's actually
I
empty.
believe it's vacant, but we would have to ask the owner.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, Christopher?
No.
Catherine Minervini, any questions?
I think I heard you right. You're replacing all the windows?
Yes.
And did you say you were changing the doors on the balconies?
Yes, we're going to bring them back to the former glory and charm we used to have.
Okay, but there's still a door, not a window, right?
There's still a door, correct?
Yeah, okay, just wanted to make sure. I thought that's what you said. Thank you.
And Bonnie Knock, do you have any questions for Mr. Savarese?
None here.
Okay, we'll open it up to the board professionals. Jason or Donna, do you have any questions for Mr. Savarese?
None for me, thank you.
This is Donna Miller. Yes, Mr. Savarese, are you speccing exterior light fixtures to replace the existing ones on the building?
We will be. We haven't done it yet, but we will do that.
Okay, that'll tie in to some of my questions later, I guess, with the engineer about the site lighting.
Okay. But we will be replacing decorative fixtures on the front elevation with lights that are typical to the character of the building and the light levels that should be here and not overlit.
Okay.
All right, so then I will now open it up to the public for any questions for Mr. Savarese.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone in the public that's going to cross-examine the witness, you will be limited to relevant questions. There'll be no characterization of the testimony of the witness, which essentially turns into testimony of the persons asking the questions. Anyone that doesn't follow the rules and is warned, they will be warned, and thereafter there'll be no further warnings. We will, in fact, the questionnaire and move on to the next questionnaire.
So Irina, if we have anyone in the public who has questions for Mr. Savarese?
Thank you, Jack and Chris. This is Irina. I just want to remind the public, if they want to speak or ask a question, they must use the raise hand button located at the bottom of the screen on the right corner or right-hand side. Or if you are calling from a telephone, you must dial *9. Okay, we have one person with their hand raised, Mr. Ernest Mignoli. Please ask your question specifically for the testimony that was just heard.
Yeah, Ernest Mignoli, 400 Deal Lake Drive, apartment 5D. I think I live a few blocks from the property. I guess we're talking about the Miramar, and I'm speaking with the architect, is it?
That's correct.
Okay. I had a question. Is it the architect or the engineer on the, I guess, renovations and modifications? And then it sounds like a lot of restoration work to keep the outside historical, which sounds good. However, an older building, are there provisions for all the, I don't think we heard if it was occupied or unoccupied.
Vacant.
I can't testify to that. You can speak to the owner.
Yeah, the owner is going to be called next, but the building is vacant right now.
Oh, the building is vacant. Okay. So the question is then for the neighbors, relative to the work that'll take place inside and out, will all, I guess, OSHA, EPA, dealing with, there could be asbestos in the building, lead, etc. It's near the beach, and sometimes when you point the brick and do work,
part of his testimony.
It's windy. Will all those?
That was not part of his testimony, Mr. Mignoli.
Mr. Mignoli, you've been muted. Mr. Avalone has indicated that it's not part of the testimony. Please make sure your questions are relevant to what was just said this evening. Go ahead.
Well, I thought he described that the work is being renovated, the building, an older building, and the inside is being, I guess, refurbished.
He's an architect, though, Mr. Mignoli. He is not somebody who...
Okay, so who do I ask about the EPA and OSHA permits, et cetera? The engineer?
It's nothing that's before the board right now relative to that. That has to do with construction, pulling permits. and when work is being performed. It's not part of this application.
Nor is it part of Mr. Savarese's testimony.
Okay. Is it part of anything? I mean, is there any point when I can ask that or no?
I'm going to object to it if he does.
No, I meant with other witnesses.
Sustained, Mr. Karas.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So we can't take any questions on the work that the architect is talking about and relative to any permits that might be necessary. That's not allowed, correct?
That's part of the construction department's venues to handle. That is not part of this testimony.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm finished.
Thank you. I do not see anyone else whose hand is raised, so we can move forward.
Thank you.
I'm going to
Mr.
call
Karas.
Peter Siegel to testify briefly with regard to the garbage situation in the building and how that's going to be handled.
Hi, it's Peter Siegel. I'm here. Thank
Peter,
you.
you got to be sworn in first.
Yeah, Peter, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please state your name for the record, and Andy will ask you other questions.
Peter. Hi, it's Peter Siegel. Siegel.
Hello, Peter. Mr. Siegel, how are you?
Wonderful. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Mr. Siegel, you are the principal owner of both entities that are here before the board, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you're familiar with the building and the adjacent lot next door, am I correct?
Correct.
With regard to the renovations to the building, I just want to go through the garbage situation. There was testimony from the architect with regard to where the garbage is going to be located. Just want to make sure we're correct, and if not, where it is going to be located and why. Can you go through that with the board and how it's going to be handled?
Yeah, sure. Well, historically, the garbage was, when I took over the building, the garbage was located on the, I guess it's the west side of the building. There's an alleyway, a secure alleyway within the fence line, and the building had trash and recycle cans there. We were intending to continue to have trash and recycle there. It's easily accessible, and it's out of view. And we had originally tried to relocate that to the interior of the building in the basement, but we do have a legal apartment in the basement level, and we don't have the space. And because the apartment's there, it was just not the right decision to then crowd up common areas with rubbish while a resident has to make their way to their unit. And whenever you put trash inside, there has to be all sorts of open space and ventilation and things like that. And this being an old building, it just doesn't have a lot of that inherent in the, steel and brick bones of the structure. So we opted to therefore just keep the rubbish outside in its current location.
And you're willing to create screening around that so it's not visible from the outside, am I correct?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And well, how will the trucks enter to pick up that trash, Mr.
So my company services my buildings. We have a staff, maintenance and housekeeping staff, and we tend to trash. In this particular building, trucks will not access it. In fact, on pickup days, we will put the cans out to the street and then bring them back in.
And you have experience doing that with other buildings that you have in Asbury Park, am I correct?
Yes.
All right. And by the way, the building right now is vacant, am I correct?
Yes.
Is there work being done on the building right now, Mr. Siegel?
We have an open interior wall demo permit. I think it's called an interior wall demo permit, and we are doing brick and masonry exterior repairs because there was it was very severely compromised. Water was getting in. We had to get the exterior shored up, so we've been doing the exterior masonry repairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the questions I have.
I have no further questions for Mr. Siegel either, except for one. Mr. Siegel, the property next door that you want to convert to a parking lot, do you currently own that property?
Yes, sir.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
You own that in two separate entities. The entity with the parking lot, if I'm correct, that is 405 Seawall LLC, and the adjacent property multifamily is another entity which you own, which is 407 Seawall LLC. Am I correct?
Correct. The reason that was done was because I purchased 405 Sewell. They were separate tax lots with separate owners and purchased at separate times. And so I created separate entities for them, not knowing if, you know, what the future was going to hold. And then we had the opportunity to purchase 407 Sewell. So we put that in its own entity. So
will those properties be put together, Mr. Siegel, or will it always be separate that way?
no, the intention of this application is to combine them into one tax lot and remove the two entity ownership structure that currently exists.
Yeah, that's part of the application. It's a merger of the two lots.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Karras. Thank you, Mr. Siegel. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
I will now ask the board individually if they have any questions for Mr. Siegel.
This is Russell Lewis. No, I do not have any further questions.
Thank you, Russell. Brittany.
No further questions.
Jill Potter.
No questions.
Christopher Gonzalez.
No questions.
Catherine Minerini.
No questions, thank you.
And Bonnie Knock.
None, thanks.
By the way, Peter figured out the video.
I see that. Welcome. All right, so now we'll open up to the board professionals for Mr. Siegel. Donna and Jason, do you have any questions for Mr. Siegel?
Go ahead, Don. I have no questions. This is Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Donna?
Hi, Donna Miller. So let's talk about the trash, because I recall from the prior application, Mr. Siegel, you had agreed to relocate the trash from the backyard area. And it was, I thought, to be either in the basement or in a refuse enclosure as part of the site plan application. But I mean, where those cans are located, you have to actually cross onto your neighbor's property in order to bring them out to the street. Isn't that correct?
That's not correct. I'm not certain what you're referring to. And
the site plan that shows that where your building kind of jogs back out to the west by those steps.
I apologize. Is there any way to get the site plan up so I can see what Donna's referring to? Because to my knowledge of the property, the cans reside within our property line and no access from any other. I'm not understanding.
Joe, will you bring your plans up?
Yep, bringing it up now.
So sheet 3 of 5 of the site plan, I think, shows it best.
Okay.
Can everyone see that?
So if you look toward that bottom left corner, there are some dimensions, 0.8 from the corner of the building to the property line, 0.7 from the front corner of the building to the property line. So there's that stretch where...
Could the cursor point that out? I'm not quite sure where Donna is mentioning.
Control of
identifying this area here and this area here. I'm not sworn, but there's a breezeway here, and there's the opportunity to bring it around the back.
So do you bring them through that breezeway to get to the street, or do you?
We could either bring them through the breezeway, or we could bring them the long way around the back and then out the parking lot, what we hope will be the parking lot. I'm just curious, what were you referring to as the neighbor's property line that I have to go on to do that?
I think she didn't realize that you could walk through the breezeway.
Well, if you didn't drag all the refuse through the breezeway, you would be just going around the building rather than come in, go out, whatever.
Yeah.
You have access to go right through the building that little way to bring it right out to the street. Am I correct, Peter?
That's correct.
So you're proposing just to leave them where they are, go around the back?
And enclose them.
Yes. And enclose them.
Okay.
What type of enclosure are we talking about for the refuse area?
You know, I haven't spec'd that yet, but this board is in the past and often requested and or required me to enclose refuse, and I've done so to the satisfaction of the board by either putting up metal enclosures with gates or, you know, really whatever is nice and beyond nice, whatever's like the great thing to do, I'll do. I mean, I'm not looking to make it like plywood with 2x4s and chicken wire. You know, I want to make this nice. So whatever you guys want, I'll do. If you think that you need to hold me to something, I'm happy to be held to something. If you're want to leave it up to me to make it of a material and construction which is commensurate with what you've had me do in the past at other projects, or which is commensurate with the level of work that we're doing at this building, I mean, I'm happy to do that. You know, we're not going to make it not great because we want residents to be psyched about it. We want you guys to be psyched about it.
You're willing to go up on an enclosed area to do, say, 6-foot fence, similar to what you've done on other properties. And something where you can't see through the fence and see the garbage cans. Am I correct?
Correct.
We'll make that as a condition of any approval should the board so choose.
Would there be, out between the property line and that fence, would there be any other sort of screening or landscaping or anything like that? Sorry, this is Jason, Port Engineer.
Hey, Jason. So it's a that alleyway. Its only use is for two things. Number one, it allows the basement resident to access their apartment. And then after that, it's the refuse area. So if we need to put landscaping there, you know, happy to do it. It's a little dark and it won't really survive that well. So I have to try and maybe find something that would work. But, you know, happy to make that alleyway look as attractive as possible. It is going to be an area where residents are going to access and use and look at and see. So we're happy to make it look nice for our neighbors and for the residents.
By the way, Peter, the adjacent property, that's a church, am I correct?
Yes.
And so that wall that we're looking at on the plans is the side of the church, am I correct?
Yes.
And I would, during my testimony, I'll.
Wait a minute, Joseph, if you're going to speak, we got to swear you in.
Yeah, is that
Andy, you
Joe?
want to swear him in?
Yeah, it was me. I'm just during my.
Yeah, I'm going to have Joe testify to all this and also as to all the comments from the board's professionals.
How many cans are we looking that would be actually in that location, Mr. Siegel? I mean, I would imagine there would be a lot of garbage cans.
Well, for a 20-unit building, based on other buildings of this size that I have in town, I would expect there to be perhaps half a dozen refuse cans and maybe an equal amount of recycle, or maybe 4 and 4 or 5 and 5, something like that.
So there would be a considerable amount to enclose.
Well, I don't know if I would use the word considerable. It would just be what it is. If it's 6, it's 6. If it's, 6 is certainly not as many as 20. So 20 would be considerable. Not to, split hairs over words, but whatever it is, we'll enclose it. I mean, I'm used to this kind of thing.
Peter, you purchased this building how long ago?
Approximately fall of 2018.
And the garbage cans that we see on the plan were the existing location for those cans, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm done with my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I have no further either. I'll just ask the board one more time, based on comments that were additionally made by Mr. Siegel. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Mr. Siegel?
This is Russell Lewis. I do not.
Jill Potter, I do not.
Brittany doesn't.
Catherine doesn't.
Bonnie does not.
And that leaves Chris Gonzalez.
Christopher doesn't.
Okay. So then, based on that, I will now open it up to the general public. Please keep your questions relevant to Mr. Siegel's testimony. Do we have any hands raised, Irina?
Yes, I do. One person, Annie Condit, go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead, Annie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm a resident at 410 Sewell Avenue, right across the street from the property in question. And the garbage can issue is not an issue at all. But my question to Mr. Siegel is, do you have any plans for lighting? Because it is very dark there. That would be my only consideration as to—
Ms. Condit, that was not part of his testimony. You must keep questions relevant to his testimony. There will be questions, there will be answers and testimony regarding the lighting, but Mr. Siegel was just talking about the refuse right now.
Okay, I don't see a problem with that at all.
We're going to address the lighting in the engineer's testimony.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else?
Thank you, Annie. And the other hand that we have up is Mr. Magnoli. Go ahead and speak.
Yeah, Ernest Mignoli, 400 Deal Lake Drive. I had a question for Mr. Siegel. Would it be multi-day pickup, or are you planning like a weekly pickup, or?
I don't plan pickup. It's municipal pickup, and whatever the municipal rubbish pickup calendar is what
Oh,
we
okay. Oh, I thought, so when you meant you use your staff, that's just to, I guess, take care of the refuse and bring it out to the curb on the city cycle. Is that how it works?
It is, and I think I explicitly used that phrase and said those words.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the public for Mr. Siegel?
Thank you, Mr. Magnoli. I don't see anyone else, so we can move forward.
Great.
Next witness I have is Joseph Kachuba, our engineer.
Evening.
Joseph, please raise your right hand. Solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please state your name for the record and spell it for us.
Joseph Kachuba, Kociuba.
Welcome, Mr. Kachuba.
Thank you.
Mr. Kachuba, if you can go through the benefit of your qualifications so we can qualify you as an engineer.
Certainly, I'm a licensed engineer, licensed planner in the state of New Jersey. I have a civil and structural engineering degree from Rowan University, a master's and a bachelor's degree.
Excuse the interruption. Pardon.
Yeah.
You've testified before this board?
I have.
Okay. And we previously accepted his qualifications?
We do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem.
Mr. Kachuba, I'm going to have you take a look at what's been pre-marked as A2 for identification. Can you please take a look at that?
Certainly. Which exhibit is that?
A2, that's your plan.
Certainly.
Okay, and I think that is what is up on the screen. Am I correct?
Correct. This is sheet 3 of my plan.
There we go. Okay, take a look at what's marked as A2 for identification. You prepared this exhibit, am I correct?
I did, yes.
And you're familiar with the property at issue that we're here for tonight, or the properties, the 2 lots, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm going to do is have you go through your plan Exhibit A2 and describe what the site is and what is being proposed with regard to this application. Go ahead.
Certainly. So I'll refer first to sheet 2 of my plan set, which shows the existing conditions for the board's edification. As you can see, the western side of the property maintains the existing building. The eastern side is the vacant area, lot 9, that we're looking to construct a parking area. The applicant is seeking to construct as much parking as feasible, given that no off-street parking currently exists for the site. The 2 lots will be consolidated as a condition of the approval, creating 1 lot that's 14,500 square feet. I will now move to sheet 3 of my set, which is the layout sheet, layout grading and drainage plan showing the lot and the improvements. We're proposing to construct a handicap access way shown here with a handicap ramp for proper handicap access to the front entry of the property. Planters are proposed at the front of the property on either side of the entryway, as well as a 12-car parking lot to the east of the existing building in order to provide some off-street parking where none previously existed. We had submitted a previous layout of this off-street parking, which had shown a flipped orientation where the entryway was towards the western side and the stalls were towards the east, facing towards the residents to the east. Determined that that was wasn't the best solution. So we have since revised the application.
In fact, you're familiar, the neighbor had objected to that and they asked that it be flipped around where the parking faced the multifamily building. Am I correct?
Correct.
And that was accommodated and the plans were revised as they are presented tonight, correct?
Correct.
All right, go ahead.
And you have 1 handicap spot listed there currently, Mr. Koshuba?
That is correct. So
and obviously it's closest to the ramp.
Closest to the ramp, the aisle for the handicap stall has direct access to the accessible walkway and ramp to the front entry. So the aisle is furthest towards the east along the property line with the 24-foot aisle and parking stalls to the west of that facing towards the building. There'll be a 24-foot depressed curb and apron accessing the site. There'll be handicap ramps on either side of that apron. And as you enter, there will be 9 perpendicular stalls that are not accessible and 1 accessible perpendicular stall, as well as 2 parallel stalls in the northeast corner of that parking lot. In order to...
I have a question regarding those 2 parallel parking. If there's a car parked in the stall closest to the exit, how does a car get into the into front of that particular?
You're saying that this stall here with
yes.
the indication of 2 on it. So the stalls, the northern stall is identified as a 22-foot wide stall, which is longer than a typical car with the anticipation of having parallel parking there. The reality being those 2 stalls likely are for a more compact type vehicle. The intent here was to maximize the parking as much as we could, given that there is no off-street parking provided. So I would anticipate that that particular stall would be generally controlled by the accessibility of the vehicle. So smaller vehicles could access that, but any larger vehicle like a pickup truck, I don't think would be able to access that particular stall.
It could be so designated as a stall for a compact car, am I correct?
Certainly, we could designate both that and both those parallel stalls as compact stalls.
And the effort that you made here was to try to get as much parking as you can where there is no parking today, am I correct?
Correct, that was the design challenge we were given.
So if you were to pull into that parking lot, is there enough room with that aisle to turn around your vehicle and pull out without having to back out?
If a parking stall is available, yes. If all the parking stalls are full, then no, I don't believe there's enough room to make a K-turn and exit out.
They would have to back out of the parking lot, am I correct?
That's correct.
No different than if you had a garage in the back of a house and you pulled up in a narrow driveway, you would have to back out similarly, am I correct?
Correct. Exactly.
Please go on.
I have a quick question. This is Brittany, before you continue.
Certainly.
What was the reason why you said you originally had the driveway on the western edge, but now it's on the east?
Yeah, the neighbor had, originally the parking, the stalls were facing the adjacent property to the east, the one-family house. And the neighbor had requested that it be flipped. And so the light then and the headlights go towards the building, the multifamily building that we're merging with.
The neighbor to the east.
To the east. Asked that we flipped it so the cars face the west.
Lot 8.
Right, so we accommodated that.
So in that flip scenario, the two parallel parking stalls fit into this kind of corner here. So the scenario was a little more aligned, but the number of stalls and the general alignment is the same.
Do we have proof of that neighbor's request, or is that just a verbal request?
It's a verbal request. Calls had come in from the neighbor. I believe the neighbor is going to be, I don't know, I understand she's going to be testifying or providing testimony tonight or asking questions.
Oh, she is? Fantastic.
Mr. Carrison, Mr. Lewis, the neighbor in question is on this meeting tonight, and they testified at the last meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you.
But, you know, thinking about it, I believe their testimony was a request at that last hearing to flip it around.
Just so they can verify that, that's all I care about.
She was at the last meeting and making those requests. I remember.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Irene and Chris, your memory's better than mine, but I do recall it now. Joe, go on.
So there was some question in the professionals' reports regarding aisle width and the ability to exit some of the stalls. As I indicated, the parallel stalls should be identified as compact stalls. There's question whether this particular stall, the sixth stall back from the street, can exit. They do have the benefit of a full 24-foot aisle behind them, so they can certainly back out and exit in a normal fashion. The next stall, the fifth stall, does have room to back out, but I imagine that particular stall might take more than one maneuver to exit, but certainly can exit, or in lieu of that, be able to exit in a rear fashion, backing out of the park.
What are the sizes of each of these stalls?
The stalls are 9 by 18, and the aisles are 24 feet.
Jason, is that the correct size for each stall?
Yeah, the stall sizes are okay. The other thing, and I think Joe kind of lightly touched on it, is the distance between parking space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and the parallel space. We scaled off about 16 or so feet for the aisle width in there. It's a throat. So it's a bit of a technicality because you got a 24-foot aisle up by the street, and then in the back you have a 24-foot aisle. You got that, I should call it a bottleneck. There's a bottleneck there about 16 feet wide. So that's where relief would be required.
Right. Correct. And we are requesting that relief. You know, the intent here again is to just maximize the amount of off-street parking that's available.
This is Donna Miller. Technically, isn't there also relief for the size of the parallel space at 18 feet?
You are correct. So a parallel space is required to be 22 feet in depth. This particular space we've identified it at 18 simply because there is no parking behind it. There is no need to enter it from the side, so it can be accessed in a forward fashion.
Well, I'm not too keen on those parallel spaces. Unless they're really designated as compact spaces for both of them. They seem to would provide a difficulty for people to back out of there or anybody to turn around.
We'd have no objection to designating those as compact spaces, certainly.
This is Donna Miller again. That raises another design exception because you're not eligible to provide compact spaces under the ordinance.
I understand. Yeah, I'm not really in favor of those 2 spaces at all. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but I think it would make it very difficult for people to back out and turn around. Especially if all the spaces were full.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. Would you be able to do the full K-turn if 1 or 2 of those parallel spaces were taken out?
If the first parallel space was taken out, then and every single stall would have a full 24 feet behind the stall to be able to exit out. If both stalls were taken out, we certainly could. I think a vehicle could maneuver to make a turn there. It'd be very tight, but I think you could make a K-turn there. If one of the stalls remains, I don't know that there's enough room there to make a K-turn with a standard passenger vehicle.
What do you think, Jason?
You're on mute.
Jason, you're on mute.
Yeah.
I actually wasn't. I was just doing that for fun. No, I'm just kidding. All right. There's a couple ways to look at this. You know, this is a situation where they're trying to get as much parking as they can. You know, the parallel spaces that are in there, there's tighter configurations. And I'm not saying that makes it right. I guess what the board could consider is if there's nothing for the building today and they provide the 10 without the parallel spaces, that's an improvement. Or if they provide the 12, there's an opportunity for another couple of cars there. Maybe somebody has a motorcycle, maybe somebody has a Cooper, you know, something like that. Maybe they could be used. If we really wanted to analyze how the vehicles can move around in there, a turning exhibit would be the way to do it. And we'd be able to see how many moves it takes for a car to do that. Whether you're backing out or you're making those moves. If the southern space was taken out, I think that let me say it this way. I think that the northern parallel space is a real challenge. If there's a car in the southern parallel space, unless you have something very small, like I said, maybe maybe not, a motorcycle, you're not getting anything in that northern space. Maybe you can, but if you take the bottom one out, the southern one out, and you leave the other one, you could probably make that work with almost any car, especially if it's compact. I think it'd be okay. It's not ideal. It's, you know, it's not like a retail parking lot, but in situations like this,
I'm trying to look at it from a safety standpoint, right? To turn around and from, you know, people had a lot to drink the night before, or they're pulling in.
Well, they won't be drinking if they had a lot to, they won't be driving if they had a lot to drink.
Yeah, right. And if they did, I'd be concerned about people trying to get into those parking spaces, quite honestly, without damage occurring or somebody getting hurt. I think that's my most concern, is to make it as safe as possible and look at it from the worst case scenario. I understand that we're getting cars off the street, and that's a wonderful thing. When you go from 0 to a certain number, it's a great improvement. But I also want to make the parking lot safe.
So when you say those spaces, you're focusing on the parallel spaces?
For the most part, Jason. And I see your point in regards to the most northern of it. I don't want to say that we have to designate the parallel spaces as either compact or a motorcycle space.
Well, I was just going to suggest that if we do the northerly one, just make that motorcycle parking. That's easy to maneuver. Just have the then southern space as a regular parking space.
I think that's a reasonable compromise. I'm not, this is Russell Lewis. I think the 2 spaces is what I'm having trouble with. I think 1 makes more sense, but if you wanted to dedicate the most northern one to motorcycles, you could probably get 3 in there, 2 easily. I think that's
easily maneuverable to get the bike down.
I think that's an extremely reasonable suggestion.
I'd like to pile one more suggestion on top of that. The northernmost space to the left, excuse me, the 90-degree space. Typically, when you're in a dead-end parking lot like that, you would have a little bit of a hammerhead to give the car a chance to back up and, you know, begin your maneuver, right? You're
Right.
in the tail end. You don't have that there. So if we're going to change the parallel spaces, I think it would make sense to start the head side, the northern side of that parallel space at the southern side. This is a lot to say in words. The southern side of the 90-degree space. Did that make sense?
Say that again, Jason, please.
9 feet off the northern curb.
Joe, can you just outline what I was talking about there, please?
Certainly. So you're talking about starting that space 9 feet off the northern curb.
Yes, and that would give an oversized backup area for the upper left car to be able to back up and get out of there safely.
I don't, if you can.
Here he goes.
Trying through the connection, it really doesn't want to work.
So basically that square you put there is going to be a no parking zone. That's going to be an extended backup zone for, Joe, just put your cursor on the parking space we're talking about to the left there.
For this one here.
They would have an extended backup space where that red box is. No parking.
And then have motorcycle parking right to the south of that, and then have the other parking space, a parallel space.
And maintain this space. Yeah, we could certainly do that.
Joe, can you zoom in on that also so everyone can see, please?
But you can't go past where the aisle jogs. You can't have parallel back there because you got a 24-foot aisle.
Correct. So I think this, the 18-foot stall, the 18-foot parallel stays where it is, and the motorcycle parking area just gets reduced by 9 feet, becomes 13 feet by the width, by 9.
All right, now, Mr. Chairman, you just have to be comfortable then that if a motorcycle is parked right where Joe's cursor is, the hand,
right,
the space below it is a vehicle. The motorcycle's a no-brainer. I mean, you can almost spin those in place, but the car below it, how does that get out? You know, I think an argument could be made that it can do it. To your level of comfort is the question.
How many feet are we talking about backing out of that space onto the street? I don't think it's that much.
No, I would say it's probably about 60 feet, maybe.
No different than what we have ordinarily on a house with, even less so, a house with a parking garage in the back.
Correct. I mean, you can see the adjacent house. The back of the house is about where the back of that stall is.
Well, I'm always willing to compromise and find the best solution. If that's the best we could come up with to optimize the use of this property and to get as many cars off the street, I'm willing to compromise if everybody's in agreement.
I have a couple questions. Are these assigned parking spots, or is it first come, first serve?
We haven't even gotten to that point yet.
Okay, just curious. Is there bicycle parking on the property? Bike racks?
We don't have an identified location, but there is a concrete walkway to the rear that we could certainly accommodate a bike rack there if the board saw fit.
And what about the fencing around the parking lot right now, Mr. Kashuba? What do you have planned for that?
So we're proposing a 6-foot vinyl fence to surround both the east and northerly sides of the building, or of the parking. There was a request by the board planner to extend the fence. Right now, we end that fence right here at the front yard setback of the building. There was a request to extend that to the front property line, which we have no objection to.
However, and we bring it down to 4 feet. Am I correct?
So it would be reduced to a 4-foot height in the front yard area. There was also a request to extend the rear 6-foot fence located here further along to further screen the parking. We have no objection to extending that. I guess he doesn't want the fence. Extend that fence over to the end of the parking lot, which we have no objection to doing as well.
And both, everything is made out of vinyl, is that correct?
Correct. Everything would be vinyl fencing. Vinyl privacy fencing.
In terms of the fence, excuse me again, in terms of the fence extending out to the front, one thing we'd want to see on the plans, Joe, if you're going to do that, is a site triangle.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Are you done with your testimony?
I am not.
Okay, because I have more questions, but I don't know if you're going to hit on more things or not.
We have landscaping, lighting, drainage. We have a lot of stuff to hit on still.
Yeah.
So please proceed, Mr. Kashuba.
Certainly. So that would finalize the layout. The grading of the property is going to match existing grading today, where there's a slight slope from the north to the south, from the back of the parking lot out to the front. For stormwater purposes, our intent is to install 3 inlets, which are shown here on sheet 3 of my set, Exhibit A2.
Is this concrete that would be for the parking lot, or asphalt, Mr. Kashuba?
We anticipate asphalt.
Asphalt.
The 3 inlets will connect via an underground recharge pipe. The intent of that system is to capture the runoff, especially at the lowest point down here at the southerly end of the parking lot, and retain that water during the water quality storm, and recharge it into the ground for beneficial recharge to the aquifer. Again, the intent is to maintain the water quality storm. Larger storms would bypass the system and flow out the driveway to the gutter line of Sewell Ave and flow down the gutter as it does today. That currently this area drains to the gutter line. There was a request in the board engineer's report regarding a physical connection to an existing system. We've discussed that with the applicant. We would ask the board for relief from having to connect all the way across Sewell Ave and opening up the street for a connection on such a small system. What we could do is increase the size of the system with what they call a recharger units. Brand names are Coltech or Stormtech type system, where it would provide a lot more storage on the site. We could maintain or contain the 2-year storm or larger, whereby in most cases, all the water would be stored on site. Only in the largest of storms, say 10 and 100-year storm, you would have flow that would exit those inlets and flow down the gutter line. Typically the concern there would be in the winter months, that the runoff coming down the apron and freezing. Again, if the system is properly sized to store the 10-year or the 2-year storm, that would be a very infrequent occurrence, if at all.
Speaking of the winter, how would you handle removal of snow for this particular parking lot?
So snow removal on this is likely going to be, they're going to have to utilize this walkway back here for storage of snow, or there's an area here against the building, or in the worst case, the motorcycle parking, if you're probably not using your motorcycles in the snow, it would turn into a snow pile.
Are you going to be putting in car stops as well?
There was a request to put in wheel stops specifically where the stalls become very close to the building located here. We have no objection to providing wheel stops. We will do so. As far as landscaping is concerned, there are limited areas for landscaping given the fact that we are trying to maximize the amount of parking. As such, we are providing some low shrub type material to try and screen the parking lot located here to the south of the handicap aisle. That is located in the right of way outside the property lines. We acknowledge that and will certainly seek to gain approval from the city for that installation. It is certainly a benefit in our eyes, and we don't foresee any concerns from the city to obtain that. We're proposing street trees along the frontage of the property. There was a request by the board planner for a change of material for those. We have no objection to that as well. I'll switch to sheet 4, which shows the landscaping and lighting design. So I guess the predominant tree on the street, on this side of the street, is a London plane tree. We have no objection to changing our material to the London plane.
How many trees are existing right now in the front?
Correct.
How many trees are there in the front?
Existing, there's one. We're proposing 3 more.
All right, and we're in agreement that we can change that to the tree that was recommended, am I correct?
We are, yes.
And there's a comment in the planner's report about doing plantings on additional areas to the east side and to the rear of the building, am I correct?
Correct.
Now, on the east side, that one area right in the middle is going to be necessary for snow removal, am I correct?
Correct. So any landscaping placed there is likely to be inundated during snow removal and potentially crushed. So there's not a lot of material that could survive that there. We could do some low ground plantings, but anything of any substantial size would cause or ultimately be destroyed during snow removal.
What about to the rear of the property?
The rear of the property is currently that concrete walkway area and is very secluded. There's a, as indicated where the garbage is, and this whole rear area is kind of an alleyway out of view. The only place it's seen is essentially from the end of this parking stall. I don't know the benefit that would provide. There are large trees along the backyards of the other properties. There's a bunch of shade here, so any proposed landscaping back there would be difficult to maintain, wouldn't have much sunlight. So we would try and concentrate any proposed landscaping towards the front, trying to screen the parking here, proposing planters to add to the landscaping there. There was a request there to vary the plantings in the planters. We have no objection to that as well.
Let's talk about the proposed planters that are going to be added to the front of the building.
Okay, so the planters shown here, we show them with Lorope, which is a low-growing green, evergreen type of material to fill those areas and just add some green space to the front that's somewhat elevated and kind of beautify that entrance.
Excuse me. I have a question for Russell and Donna regarding the street trees. I assume, do we need, not sure if I assume this or not, do we need Shade Tree Commission input on those street trees, Russell?
As far as species?
Yeah, do we?
There is a list of approved street trees. Maybe they could just submit that to the Environment and Shade Tree Commission, and we can just say yes, yay or nay. I do know that Mr. Pavinsky, who is our chairman, is in support of lots of different varieties of trees. Okay. Yeah. So we are looking for a multiculture in town. You do not necessarily have to plant London planes. We are looking to get as many multicultured species in town. I do know that there's not a lot of sun that hits that area because of the height of the buildings that are around. So I would just recommend, getting species that can thrive in low light conditions.
So what do you have on? You have a red maple.
We showed a red maple, which we could go with a bow haul red maple, which is a little bit more columnar type material, but we're open to suggestions.
I do know that most maples are approved as street trees in Asbury Park, so I'm going to unofficially say that I think that that's fine, but it would probably be good for us just to make sure that Mr. Pavinsky's eyes get on that.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, with planning board applications, we typically for site plan, which we do here as an ancillary jurisdiction thing, the Shade Tree Commission has some input, so it'll be good.
Yeah, we would agree to any potential approval be subject to any recommendation by them.
Thank you.
This is Donna Miller. Actually, we've had recent discussions about this topic, and there's likely to be a procedural shift in how those recommendations are being made as part of our zoning amendments process and the checklist, and things like that. So again, Michael and I, having a landscape architecture background and him being a landscape architect, have made those recommendations based on the experience and knowledge. We're happy to coordinate with the commission. But I think that's going to be, there'll be a slight change in procedure on that coming.
So what do we do?
We've made our recommendation, and if they want to make a presentation to Shade and Environmental Commission, they can do that. And it will be, you know, as part of a resolution, it would just be.
Right, okay. Now I just need to know what, if we're required, we'll send it. If not, and you have the knowledge, we'll go with what you recommended. I mean, you know, whatever.
This is Chris Avalone. The only thing, my greatest concern is that whatever is planted, it be salt tolerant, and it has
I'm just approaching it from a procedural requirement point of view.
Yeah, I want to make sure we get it right. Yeah,
we do, we will, type of thing.
And to Russell's point, it's valid. We don't want a monoculture. That's been a problem in the past. We have a lot of London plane, and when they suffer from whatever London planes suffer from, you know, there are myriad things that affect them, whether, you know, if we have a really dry, hot summer. So, you know, and the utility companies beat the living daylights out of them. So, you know, we take that as a valid criticism. So,
yeah, absolutely. Looking at the conditions of the soil, because there are so many different soil conditions in and around Asbury Park, especially the closer you get to the coast. But looking at the wires above and the sort of total planting conditions are very important. I'll also say that a irrigation or watering plan for the first 2 growing seasons is vital for any tree to survive. So regardless of what tree goes in there, if we can, and I don't know, Donna, if this is going to be something that you're recommending, but a really solid, consistent watering plan for 2 growing seasons is vital for any tree.
Yeah, actually, as part of the design standards amendments that are going, I think, to the governing body at the next meeting, include planting specifications that are beefed up over what's currently in the ordinance, so that they're addressing water, fertilization, adequate root zone, and things of that nature.
Great.
Also,
procedurally.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Procedurally for this application, because I'm used to the way it's been historically with applications before the zoning board and the planning board, that if we would, after the approval of an application or as a condition of any application, we get a recommendation from the Shade Tree Commission, and that's what we end up planting. That's my understanding of the procedure currently still. But you tell me.
Oh, no, you're quite correct, Mr. Karras. We're just trying to be more sensitive to the Environmental Shade Tree Committee and not inundate them with so many requests on a constant basis for them to review. So, you know, we're trying to come up with a little bit better procedure for the whole aspect of plantings and what species should be chosen. And that's one of the amendments that we've been talking about on the zoning amendment committee.
Okay.
I have a question, Donna or Russell, since you guys seem to be the tree experts. Do you know what is planted across the street with the Monroe, that whole new development?
Yeah, those are honey locusts.
And are those bad?
No.
Okay, I would maybe want to see match, because I think they did a pretty good job playing in the trees. Maybe could match across the street.
If you want to match, I mean, that's fine.
So there we go again. So on the same side of the street, the ordinance actually says to match what's on the same side of the street. And that helps when there's different plantings on different sides of the streets from that monoculture problem. So yeah, you don't have the symmetry that LA kind of effect as you look down the boulevard. Not that, you know, Sewell is boulevard, but you know, as you look down the street, yeah, these are going to be 2 different species on either side of the street. So I like the honey locust. They have that nice light filtering leaf type. And since there's a lot of structure and a lot of mass from the buildings, that's a nice plant material to soften. But I do love the London planes as well for their attributes. it's a coin toss. We really don't recommend the red maple though for this location.
Joe, do you have any opposition to the honey locust?
I have no opposition to the honey locust, no.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Please proceed.
Certainly. So I'll move on to lighting. Stay on this sheet. The lighting design proposes one pole-mounted light at the northerly end of the parking lot, shown here, denoted as B. That will be a 12-foot high light pole mounted on a concrete pedestal. Anticipate that to be approximately 12 to 16 inches in diameter. Our plan detail had indicated an incorrect mounting height, which was adequately noted on both the professionals' reports. So the light distribution you see in the calculations we did were based upon a 12-foot mounting height. However, the detail showed a 20-foot mounting height. That was incorrect. There was a question regarding that particular pole and spillage onto the neighboring property. We will provide a house side shield on that. The light that's proposed is an LED downcast full cutoff light that's night sky friendly. The house side shield in those cases, in the newer lights, isn't actually a shield around the back of the light like you normally see. Each individual light node is shielded. We can also add a mast arm to that light to extend it out over the parking lot a little further, just to ensure that the light is out away from the fence and does not spill backwards onto the northerly lot. We are also proposing 5 building mounted lights. Those were also shown at a 12-foot mounting height, also LED downcast full cutoff lights. There were some comments from the board planner regarding the spillage at the southeast corner, specifically at this location here. In our lighting calculations, we did model the fencing ending at this point, which is what has caused this spillage here. When we extend that fence down to the property line, that will certainly help to reduce that spillage off site. We will also provide, like I said, at the northerly end, and a mast arm extension to try and address spillage off to the northerly property. Obviously, this parking lot is very close to the adjacent lots. It's 1.5 feet off the eastern lot and 1.3 feet off the northern lot. So we want to, it's a difficult balance here of providing safe, adequate lighting while also not having spillage onto adjacent properties.
And the details for that lighting are reflected on sheet 5 of your plans, am I correct?
Correct. With the details there show just the light, the look of the light specifically. That's located here on our plan sheet. We can certainly provide the full light cut sheets on our plans for review by your professionals as they have requested. I believe that would conclude my testimony unless the board or anyone else has any questions.
What I want to do, let me just go through the various reports with you.
Certainly.
Just to make sure that we hit upon everything. All right, the first report I'm going to go through, and I'm sure we can mark this for identification, is the Clark Dayton Hints report dated June 5th of 2020. What are we up to, A5?
Irina?
Sorry, that's going to be exhibit B1.
I'm sorry, B1, okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is Donna. Andy, before you go through the variances, can I ask a couple questions about the lighting?
Sure.
Mr. Kashuba, okay, so Mr. Savarese had said that the building mounting lighting, he hadn't yet spec'd. He wanted to use something that was architecturally compatible with the style of the building.
Yes.
Engineers got a partial detail of a building mounted fixture, which is not what I think Mr. Savarese would find to be architecturally compatible with the style of the building. So which is it going to be?
Well, the light we show is certainly a more modern light, but if, when Mr. Savarese chooses something that's a little more appropriate architecturally, we'll certainly update the calculations accordingly. with this, the calculations we did here are based upon the light that we specify on our plans.
So is the board agreeable to leaving that, approving that change to either me or Jason, or is that something you guys want to see?
It's a good point.
If it helps, this is Jason. If it helps, Mr. Chairman, Donna, just to piggyback on what you're saying, if we were to go that route, what I would be looking for is that the photometric performance would be similar to what they're presenting here. And then in terms of the architectural compatibility, Donna, I would lean on you for that if the board decided to go that way.
We're fine with that. To be honest with you, I'd hate to come back. We got the report here from the planner yesterday. If we had enough time to look at different designs of lighting, we would have presented them to the board tonight, but we just got the report, so we're kind of behind the eight ball. I don't want to have to come back again.
If the board is amenable to that, Mr. Karras, and your applicant is amenable, I would leave the design aspect for Donna to review and Jason for the photoelectric aspect. I'd be willing to do that if the rest of the board would be willing.
I'm okay with that as well. This is Russell Lewis.
I would be okay with that as well. Jill Potter. Bonnie, I would be okay with that.
Christopher Gonzalez, I'm okay with that.
Brittany's okay with that too.
Wonderful.
If we accept it, if we approve it.
Catherine?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
So I think that you have your answer, Mr. Karras.
Very good. Thank you. All right, going now to what's been marked as B1 for identification is the planner's report. Going to page 3 of 13. Take a look at that. It discussed the location of the parking. We've addressed all that. Undersized stalls and drive aisle width on page 4, we've addressed that. Wheel stops, comment C, we've addressed that. Number of off-street parking, there is no off-street parking existing. I understand what's required for the building, but there's none. We're providing now 11 space with a motorcycle parking space.
Hold on. Andrew, you said that you addressed the wheel stops?
Yeah,
I didn't hear that.
We agreed before.
Yeah, I agreed to provide the wheel stops, yes.
Landscape design 3.2 on page 4. We've gone through the additional areas on the east and the rear of the building. We've discussed that, the parking buffer. We went through the limited areas that's available to provide for plantings. Parking lot plantings, again, exceptions are being requested that we are not providing. We're providing some shrubs to the front where the parking is. Public right away will have to get municipal approval to do that, but that's the only location that we can provide the parking. Going to page 6, the street trees, we've gone through that. We're fine with the honey locust. I think they would look good matching actually on both sides, but we're amenable to either. The plantings, comment D on 3.2. Foreseason interest in the planners, we're fine, absolutely fine with that, and we'll provide additional planning notes and details. We're fine with that. The site lighting will provide additional cutoffs as we have just discussed. The fixture mounting light, the height we addressed. Light spillage on page 7 we have addressed. Design compatibility. The planters. It says materials facing on planters and walls should be specified to match the existing building's brick color, size, and pattern. We're fine with that. No objection to that. Exterior light fixtures, we just addressed. Mailboxes are going on the inside as testified. 3.5 on page 8, solid waste, we've addressed that, as well as the fencing. In terms of the comments, I believe all that has been addressed. With regard to the zoning and the requirements for zoning relief, I'll have David Roberts testify when he comes up next. With regard to the insight report, Let's mark that as B2 for identification. Irina?
Just 1 second while I bring it up. All right, that's marked as Exhibit B2 on the screen.
Thank you, Irina.
This is the report from Insight dated April 9th, 2020, the engineering review relative to this project. I'm going to go to page 2 on the completeness review. Comment 1, comment regarding matching the names and address on the application. No problem with that. Comment 2, flood zone information. We'll revise that to reflect that. Comment 3,
Hold on, I have a question on that. Since we're talking about flood zone, is this in a flood zone?
It is not. It's in flood zone X, which is the not a flood.
Okay, thank you.
We'll reflect that on the plans also. Comment 3, location of individual trees within 200 feet. We have no issue with the board waiving the requirement, temporary waiving the requirement. The understanding it's limited to the property. No objection to that. Nearest fire hydrant, comment 4. And we're okay with that comment. Grass areas to reflect on the plans. No objection to that. Refuse storage, number 7, we provided testimony on that. In terms of the operations, basically the refuse, we provided testimony from Mr. Siegel and how that would operate. Location of mechanical equipment, our architect already addressed that. Lighting notes, we've gone through that. Provided testimony. 12, the stormwater runoff, we already provided our recommendation how to deal with the stormwater. That includes the comment number 13. Number 14, pavement repair. No problem with that. Same with 15 and 16, construction while that's taking place if the application is approved regarding repairs. No objection to that. Detail number 17 for the concrete driveway. No objection to that. Number 18 has to do with the minimum distance between driveways is 50 feet. Plan sets forth 43 feet. That's based upon the way the driveway was changed to accommodate the adjacent property, so variance relief is being requested for that. No loading areas are being in number 19. The variance relief is being requested with regard to the buffer strip. 20, grading details, no objection to that. 88 parking we provided as reflected in that comment. The fence, the 2 parking, number 21, the 2 parallel parking space, we've addressed that and how we're going to revise that. 22, the same thing with that. Aisle width we've addressed in 22 also. 23, a conflict with an existing utility pole in the northeastern corner of the property. Joe, can you address that?
There is an existing utility pole there located in that northeast corner. The curb may have to, end at the utility pole. I don't think there's the ability to relocate it. So we will certainly address it in the field, but I anticipate the curb will probably stop around the pole.
Okay. 25, testimony regarding the screen of any exterior mechanical equipment as testified by the architect that's going on the roof, and the parapet will hide that. 29 has to do with the parallel space. We've already addressed that. And I think that's pretty much all the relevant comments in the engineering report. Anything else before from the board?
Thank you, Mr. Karras. I will now ask, I have no further questions for Mr. Koshuba. I will now ask each individual board member for questions regarding any of the testimony that Mr. Koshuba has provided. I will start with Russell.
I do not have any further questions. Thank you.
Brittany.
Yeah, I have a few questions. And this might be more for Jack too. So we can't guarantee, or they can't obviously guarantee a permit in the right of way for the planning that Donna was recommending by the entrance, but they can do it, the street trees, is that also within the right of way, or is that on their property?
Andy, the street trees in the right of way?
Yes. Am I
So
correct, Jeff?
Okay, so essentially you can't guarantee any tree planting because it's all within the right of way.
No, we'll have to go before the mayor and council to get
Yeah.
approval.
Yes.
Typical resolution, planning and zoning boards reads subject to approval of any encroachments into the right of way by the mayor and council. If they don't get approval, they'll have to come back and present a different plan.
Okay. Honestly, my big issue is that we're taking a single family lot and turning it into a paved parking lot. I'm trying to look on the plans and I see, what's your building coverage? The 53?
The building covered, the building exists, but yeah, the building coverage that we're showing on the existing lot was 53. Once we consolidate the lots, that reduces to 37.
Well, I guess that's impervious coverage I should be asking then, Donna, right? Not building coverage because parking doesn't, okay, so walk me through how much is that covered right now?
So the impervious coverage right now is about 6.3%. The proposed will be 83.26%. I don't believe there's a zoning requirement for impervious coverage.
So you're saying that your site now can withstand a 2-year storm?
Correct. We would amend the plan to be able to store the 2-year storm, regardless of infiltration. The system would store the 2-year storm. When you account for infiltration rates, so we don't account for that to provide a factor of safety, but when you account for infiltration rates, it will hold a larger storm than that.
Okay, is it possible to design for, say, a 10 or 50-year storm, since that's becoming more common every year?
Well, unfortunately, that system size then gets very, very large. And we do have a water table. It's not exceptionally shallow, but it is shallow enough that it does limit us in the height of the system we're proposing. So with the 2-year storm storage, the system will take up approximately, I would say, 20 to 25% of the parking area. So it's our opinion that is certainly sufficient to address any concern with runoff coming off the parking lot into the street.
So you're saying that you could design larger, but you aren't because it would take up parking spots?
No.
No. Not that it would take up parking spots. It would just get excessively large. It's our opinion that a 2-year storm, 2-year storage is sufficient to address.
What do you mean it would get too large? Sorry, I'm just not an engineer, so I'm trying to follow.
You have to, Joe, talk about the water table and explain that. You can only go so deep with that.
I understand that part. It's the actual structure. Walk me through.
Yeah, so that causes the footprint of that system to get exceptionally large, to where we would be digging up the entirety or an exceptional area of that parking to put this stormwater system in, and it just gets untenable as far as cost and improvement. The 2-year storm storage, in our opinion, is more than adequate to address the stormwater for this.
Jason, question for you. I don't even know where you are on this. There you are. Okay. Is that common? What's a typical, I don't even know, parking lot that's taking up residential? What have you seen in your experience?
In terms of stormwater management, this project not being a major development, typically the stormwater solution is to prove that the runoff from the site post-development would not exceed the runoff from the site pre-development, which they've demonstrated, and we'll make sure that they continue to demonstrate that.
I understand that it flows into the street now, but it's also only 6% covered. So what's going to happen when it's 84% covered? I just don't understand how we can tell if it's going to make it better when it's comparing like apples to oranges.
So but when you talk about flow rates in terms of numbers and you look at the downstream most point, say of the gutter in the street, they're going to have the same or less runoff in the post-development condition. So mathematically it works out. My bigger concern is that the method of getting this done is that there's an inlet in the parking lot, which after the 2-year storm, at some point after the 2-year storm, is just going to overflow over the surface and flow through the driveway down to the gutter. And there's those parallel parking spaces there where there's an opportunity here with an inlet across the street to make a hard connection into the city's infrastructure to keep the water underground and safely convey it downstream. That was my bigger concern.
And if they didn't connect to the city's line, it would flood those spots. But what if there weren't spots there? Would it still flood the site?
It's not going to flood the site.
Yeah.
That's not the testimony.
Well, if it's larger than a 2-year storm.
It doesn't, I think flood is probably the term.
Could there be standing water there?
No, it wouldn't be standing water. It would sheet flow down the apron. So if you're in a parking lot and you see rain hitting the parking lot, you see it sheeting across that parking lot. That's the condition that would happen. It would sheet from that lowest inlet down that parking lot and apron down to the gutter line of the street and then flow east as it does today.
Mr. Kashuba, what would be your objection to connecting to the city's infrastructure?
In order to connect to the city's infrastructure, it'd be, we would have to open the road. There'd be traffic control involved. There would be police involved. It's just a large endeavor for this type of application where we're not a major development. We've proven via the calculations that we are compliant with the ordinance as far as the flow rates. So we felt it was kind of onerous for this applicant to have to go that route.
And with that, it's a significant investment to be able to do that, which based upon this project, respectfully, we don't think that it warrants.
I think that's something we'll have to consider.
Understood.
I don't think I have anything else. You said the trash, you were gonna take care of that, but did we say how we wanted that handled?
I think the testimony was, and I'll clarify the testimony, we are proposing vinyl fence, 6-foot vinyl fence on the property as around the parking lot. So we would have no objection to creating that enclosure at the back left corner, the northwest corner, out of the 6-foot vinyl fence in order to provide a proper screening of the refuse area.
Okay. I think that's all I have for you right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. And we'll move on to Jill.
I just
Do you have any
one-
questions for
Yes.
Mr. Kashuba?
Just one quick question. Thank you. Assuming you get approval for the trees in the right of way, and we talked about irrigation for newly planted trees for 2 years, would that be a consideration?
I think that's a question for the applicant. I don't know that the city would want us to install irrigation lines out in the right of way, given that there are utility lines through there. But I would defer to the applicant.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of tough to put water lines out there, irrigation. Certainly we can come up with a plan, a 2-year plan to maintain the trees. When you look at the applicant's properties throughout the city, it's quite a number. Beautiful plantings, beautiful landscape, and maintains it very well. We'd have no issue with coming up with a plan to make sure these trees, anything within the public right of way we plant is taken care of.
This is Donna Miller. The applicant could provide irrigation within his property that sprays those shrubs and irrigate whatever, front lawn and other landscaping that might go in. That wouldn't have to extend all the way into the right of way.
I don't know how you're going to do that when you have a parking lot right behind it, how it's going to spray there.
Yeah, the shrubs in front of the parking area specifically, I think that would be a little difficult.
This is Russell Lewis. When I was talking about irrigation, I wasn't necessarily meaning in-ground irrigation. I was just meaning to irrigate the trees properly. They can also have gator bags installed, which are very easy for maintenance people to fill up, you know, twice a week. So when I say irrigation, that also means man fulfilled, not necessarily underground.
Yeah, the whole property is being upgraded. When you look at the money that's being spent to really upgrade the property, a lot of it's visual, it's the aesthetics, and they're not going to want dying trees or dying plants around the property. So they'll maintain it, and they'll come up to the plan to reflect how they're going to maintain it.
Valid point, Mr. Karras. Any further questions, Jill?
No further ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher Gonzalez, any questions for Mr. Kashuba?
No questions.
Thank you. Catherine Minervini.
No questions from me. Thank you.
And finally, Bonnie Knock.
None here. Thank you.
All right. I'll open it up to the board professionals.
Jason.
Donna or Jason?
Donna, go ahead.
Oh, come on, you go, Jason.
One question about the fence. I believe that the neighbor to the east has a fence as well, correct? So we'd end up with two fences right up against each other, creating that that tough area in between. Is there a plan for that?
Correct. They do have a vinyl fence. It is on their property and actually meanders pretty far onto their property. As you get towards the front of the property, it's probably 2 feet onto their property. So our intent was to install our fence along our property line. Certainly where their fence is closer, we could, you know, typically I'd like my client and applicant to maintain control of that privacy fence, because the neighboring property could always take their fence down at any point. I do understand the concern. You get that kind of no man's land that's very difficult to maintain, but you know, with a weed whacker and regular maintenance, it certainly can be. We would typically still put up our side of the fence.
Is the fence that you're proposing, forgive me, I don't recall the detail, does it have clearance to the ground underneath where maintenance could occur in that no man's land?
It certainly can. You know, it's typical that when those fences are installed, they're installed somewhat flush to the ground, but we could certainly specify that there's an inch or two, typically want a 2-inch reveal underneath to be able to maintain.
Okay. That's my only follow-up question. Thank you.
All right, Donna Miller, board planner. So my questions are going to go back to parking. So we're saying that ultimately the proposed lot is going to accommodate 11 vehicles now?
And half a space for motorcycles.
Correct.
I'm sorry, how many?
11 spaces and a motorcycle space.
A motorcycle bay, okay. And based on our calculations under the city's requirements, you need 20 spaces?
I believe that's accurate, yes.
Okay. Did you do any counts on the street? How many parking spaces are available on street? Have you done any?
Well, there are 23 parking spaces on the street. Our planner will address that.
Planner, okay. Okay. Then that's going to come through planning testimony. All right, then I'll hold the rest of these.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Jason. All right. With that, I will open it up now to the general public. Please keep your questions relevant to Mr. Kashuba's testimony. And Irina, do we have anybody in the public looking to ask Mr. Kashuba questions?
Yes, we do. First, I will call on Judy Hull. Please ask your question.
She's muted.
Okay, how's that?
Yes,
Good.
there you are.
Hi, I'm Judy Hull, and I live at 403 Sewell Avenue, right next to the proposed parking lot. And I have questions for somebody. I'm sorry, there's a lot of names. Anyway, what my questions are do you really think that plastic fence is safe? Should a vehicle come right up against it? If the driver is tipsy, they'd go right through it into my yard. That's number one. Are you planning to put any sort of curb at all there, since there are 0 setbacks now? And in the 5 stalls, when you first go in that are to the left, if somebody's foot got stuck on the accelerator, backing out, they'd come right into my living room. So I'm just wondering, the two parallel spots in the back, what you're thinking of for safety measures of my property. How about a concrete wall? That way, if somebody hits something, there's not going to be any damage done to my fence, or nobody's going to come through into my yard or into my house.
The design that has been presented is in accordance with the when you look at the design requirements for Asbury Park, I don't think a concrete wall falls within those design requirements. That's why we're proposing fencing. Unfortunately, I can't speak for anybody that gets drunk. That can happen anywhere in the city, park in front of a storefront. Somebody can go through. There are all kinds of possibilities that could happen in the world. Unfortunately, accidents happen. Fortunately, they don't happen very often. But I think the fencing that's being proposed is in accordance with the requirements of Asbury Park, in accordance with the design requirements of Asbury Park.
But there's no bumpers to stop a car from coming through the fence into my yard. There's just no setbacks. Normally when you have a parking lot, there's some sort of landscaping, a little garden or a sidewalk, and then they go up.
If somebody's tipsy, I think they pretty much go right through the landscaping or right through the sidewalk. I don't think that's going to stop them.
Well, I think it would deter them.
And there is a curb proposal on the eastern side as well.
There's a curb provided on the eastern side as well?
Yes.
As far as flooding goes and drainage and all of that, I have a nice dry basement now. How are you, I would hate to think that all the runoff, since the parking lot is so close to my basement and to my house, that any runoff, what will you do to make sure that there's no runoff from this parking lot into my nice dry basement and into my yard?
Joe, has it been designed whereby it gets stored on site and then any excess runoff would go into the street? Am I correct?
Right, it overflows the system, and it infiltrates into the ground, and when it exceeds that, it overflows the system towards the front. The piping has been located such that it's far away from that existing basement. We are proposing to expand that. The expansion would be at the northerly side of the parking lot and furthest away from that structure in order to avoid that particular concern.
Joe, there's no existing drainage on site, am I correct?
There's none, no.
And the system that's being proposed is not only equal to, but better than what is existing today, am I correct?
Correct.
I'm just wondering if there's anything better you can do to sort of safeguard my property from cars that are parked right up against it. I think it's too crowded.
Well, am I correct that you asked that the parking be switched around?
Yes,
right?
and thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate that.
And I think that alleviates a lot of the concern by the cars not pulling into or right up against your property, but up against the other building.
I can live with that. What bothers me is those 2 spaces in the back. It crams it all up.
Yeah, we're taking one, we're making it motorcycle, half motorcycle space. So we're eliminating one for a car, and you're only having one which is parallel, but it's not pointing towards your house.
No, I get it, but I still think it's too close. I think that if the car just veered off to the right a little bit, it's right in my yard. I think that fence is flimsy, and I don't think it's going to do the job to keep me safe. That's my objection.
That's more of a comment,
Yeah.
Ms. Hall.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, these are just questions that you can ask
Sorry.
regarding Mr. Kashuba's testimony. You have every opportunity to comment at the end of the application.
I see. I'm sorry. Pardon me.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay, those are my questions for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hull. I don't show any other members of the public that have questions.
Thank you,
Jason.
Arena. So you
Yes, Jason.
backing.
Jason is raising his hand. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. Joe, given the sensitivity of the proximity to the stormwater system, and because you're relying on infiltration, I think it would be prudent here to do a mounting analysis just to see what happens to the groundwater levels at the property line. Further, if you can prove that there is no effect there, I think that would go a long way in this tight proximity.
We can provide a mounting analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Is there any other further questions for Mr. Kashuba? All right, Mr. Karras, you can proceed.
Lastly, David Roberts, our planner.
Good evening, everyone.
And I know he has testified plenty of times before the board. Up to you if you want to hear his qualifications or if he's accepted.
Jack, would you mind swearing him in,
So
please?
why don't I'll take care of that. Dave, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
You've testified before the boards in Asbury Park, including the zoning board of adjustment, correct?
Most recently, last year on the charter school, yes.
In your capacity as a planner, and you are still a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Chairman.
We accept your credentials. As always, Mr. Roberts, please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the board's permission, I have, I believe it's Exhibit A3 that I just want to walk through the board. My focus this evening will be on the D variance, the D1 for the use for the parking lot, and the D2, which is the expansion of the non-conforming use as neither the existing pre-existing multifamily dwelling or the accessory parking lot would be a permitted use in the zone. So if you'd like, I can start that. I'm going to try to share my screen.
You have it, Mr. Roberts. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, can you, because I can no longer see you, so you can see the title slide?
Not yet.
A3.
There you go.
Okay, are we good?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start off. This is really just a little bit of background. This is just a key map, just to show the board how the site relates to the underlying land use policy and zoning for the city. As referenced before, the part of the site is the pre-existing multifamily building, which has already been testified to as being dated. The best information I could find was that it was constructed in 1942. 1942 would have been about maybe 4 or 5 years prior to the adoption of the first zoning ordinance for the city. So there would have been no controls over or prohibiting the multifamily building, and it was constructed prior to zoning. So it's pre-existing and non-conforming. The other property in question, lot 10 is the 45 by 100 currently vacant lot. As you can see that the current lot is situated really near the southeast corner of the renovation infill area, which is really the designated rehabilitation portion of the waterfront redevelopment area, which is directly across the street and bordered on two sides by the what the plan calls the prime renewal area, which is the designated redevelopment area, going back to the original designations in 1984. So it's basically right on the cusp of two different portions of the waterfront redevelopment area. and about 2 blocks to the north of the Central Business District redevelopment area. So there's quite a bit of interlocking redevelopment areas coming together at this point. And also, as far as the zoning district, it's located in the professional office zone. And in that zone, professional offices are permitted, and then residential units in accordance with the R2 zone are permitted, which would be single family, 2-family, and up to 4 families based on 2,500 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. The current, the lot in question is 45 by 100, so it is undersized for any of the residential uses, including single family. And what most previously was improved with a single or multiple dwelling that was listed in the scattered site redevelopment plan. You can see that the lot was indicated on the zoning map, and as Mr. Karras explained at the beginning of the hearing, the applicant moved to have the lot removed from the scattered site redevelopment plan, and it was. You can see that there are a number of others in the general area that have been part of that area as well, and may still be. This is just a sheet 3, and it's just a blow up from the scattered site redevelopment plan to show the difference between phase 1 and 1A. And I just tried to mark the site as originally part of phase 1A. The one point I wanted to bring up in terms of the underlying land use for the board's benefit is the general area where these scattered sites were located. The purpose of it was to create infill redevelopment and rehabilitation consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. And I think that is still pertinent, even though the lot itself was taken out of the plan. The neighborhood that it was located in is, I believe, the subject application is supportive of in terms of what the objective is. This is actually the part of the appendix from that plan that shows the board what was on the site on the vacant lot when it was included in the designated redevelopment area or in the scattered site renovated redevelopment area. And you can see it was a boarded up house, a boarded up dwelling. It's unclear how many units were in it, whether it was 1 family or multifamily. There were many of each in the immediate neighborhood at the time. And that dwelling had been removed and has been vacant ever since. This is a Google Earth indication of the general area. I would note that the board planners report that Michael and Donna put together very thoroughly goes over the nature of the uses around the surrounding area, and it actually shows a version of this image that's a little bit more updated and actually where you can actually see some of the projects that have been constructed across the street and around the corner from the subject property over only the past 5 years or so. It is filled in quite impressively with new residential development of a high density nature consistent with the redevelopment plan in the prime renewal area. You can also see the rest of the block in this image. The opposite side of the block fronts on Asbury Avenue and is, as Donna and Michael indicated in their report, adjacent to the historic district for Grand Avenue Park. And their Grand Avenue is just at the other end of the block and has been historically the road where many of the churches, the libraries, and so on from the founding of the city have been located. Just getting down into the immediate area, these 2 images just show 2 views of the building called the Roosevelt, which is historically what the building had been known as. There was the name of it right over the front entrance that was carved into the front facade, and then the vacant lot and the image in these photos, which were taken by myself a couple of months ago, are probably a little bit more updated. But as you can see, the visual aspect of that vacant lot is certainly not a positive for the neighborhood, which has really transformed itself over the last few years as part of the redevelopment that's been going on. I indicate in the lower right image that the building had 19 units in it. That is prior to the proposed renovation. I think the board has gotten quite a bit of testimony from Mr. Savarese about the reasons for some of the changes being done to the building. And I would note that the city went through probably a couple different eras, I would call it, of multifamily expansion. The 20s, which would be evidenced by the Brentwood, which is a couple blocks away. Then pre-war, and then some of the garden apartments that are around the city that were built in the 60s and 70s would have been the next expansion after that. So this construction of multifamily took place over the decades at several different phases in the city's history. This is just a couple of other images that I took of the street itself, and also the development across the street. So the contrast is pretty dramatic in terms of the streetscape on the redevelopment area side of Sewell, and then the side that the current property is on. And you can see the view down the street. There was a question earlier about, I think that Donna raised, about the number of parking spaces. I counted them when I was there on the property, 23 spaces altogether, 12 public spaces, numbered spaces on the same side as the property on the north side, and 11 on the south side, based on the fact that there are some driveway cuts there for the South Grand property that was the townhouse project across the street, as you can see in the upper image. And just going around two other sides of the block in question, this is as you make the turn onto Sewell Avenue. This is what's listed as a 9-unit multifamily on the corner, and then then you see the single family whose owner had testified earlier, or at least had been heard from earlier, and then the subject lot. It would be the second property in from the corner, with a multifamily on the corner, a single family next to it on I believe it's a 35 by 100-foot lot, and then the subject property beyond that. Getting into the existing zoning, as I referenced before, the two primary uses are in the PO zone, or professional offices, and 2 to 4 family residential based on 2,500 square feet per unit. And as you can see, there's off-street parking requirements. There's no listing of a standalone parking as a permitted use, or even as an accessory use for multifamily. So the reason that we have to address both the D1 and D2 is that the multifamily building itself is not a permitted use. The parking lot is associated as an accessory. It's effectively expanding that use, and then the parking lot, as a permitted use in that zone, is not addressed in the ordinance. So you probably could argue that the expansion of the non-conforming use includes the parking, because there is no parking currently provided for it, but I'll be addressing it on both counts. They're very comparable in terms of D1 and D2. It's just that D1 proofs are more traditional based on the Medici decision, but that's the underlying zoning. In terms of the special reasons, which I need to make a case for, I find that the proximity of this lot next to the building, in this particular situation where the building traditionally had no land left for any type of parking on it because of the time period in which it was built, makes it almost an opportunity that is too hard to pass up in terms of the shortage of parking generally, and in particular, the closer you get to the CBD, the need for parking becomes even more acute. The new development that's been occurring in and around the area does provide parking for off-street use, but the on-street parking, the pressure on that gets more and more acute as you move closer and closer to the CBD. And as was mentioned before, the 45-foot width is just enough to be able to get those spaces. Now, I had based it on 12 because that's what the original site plan called for. There's an indication that there was, well, we would lose a space. It looks like it will be 11, but still it essentially covers the on-street spaces that are in front of the block from one end to the other. It compensates for those 12 spaces that allows, even 11 spaces, it allows those spaces then to be available to the general public. And that's where the shortage is acute.
David, you mentioned the CBD. We're 2 blocks in from the CBD, am I correct?
Correct.
And is there a parking shortage, a significant parking shortage and parking problem that we find within the CBD that lends itself to trying to create additional parking right on the outside of that area?
It's a general condition throughout the city, especially in the summertime, but in the CBD, where historically many of the properties did not have their own parking on site and have to rely on public parking, any street parking that's available that can be use the kiosk system to be able to access. Every parking space is precious, as the city fortunately has transformed itself, and it's really created a residential community in that area. But also, parking is at a premium, especially in the summertime. So every parking space is critical, in my opinion. And I would say that in addition to being particularly suitable in this specific location next to this specific building where there's no other opportunity to get cars off the street, it also advances 3 purposes of zoning that I would identify as A, which is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use of development of all lands in the state, effectively to promote the health, safety, and welfare, and in this case, the ability to get to improve the availability of overall public parking by providing at least a portion of the parking requirement that historically had never been available before, is going to benefit the public welfare generally in that neighborhood. Just for an example, when the church on the corner is in session, the church itself has none of its own parking, so it relies on the street parking for anyone that might be driving to services there. And there's another church around the corner which relies on public parking on Asbury Avenue. So it's very common to have these properties, many of which don't have their own off-street parking. In purpose G, it's just to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses, paraphrasing, both public and private, in accordance to the environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of New Jersey citizens. And again, I think this opportunity to not only rehabilitate this building that has been deteriorating in place for many years, and then provide some of that, at least some of the parking that the building will require is something that's meeting the needs of Jersey citizens, especially for public parking. And then finally, to promote a desirable visual environment, as was evidenced in the photo I took from the street a few months ago of the vacant lot. At this point, it's kind of in a period, a sort of a state of transition. There has been no application to build on it. It probably could be improved with a dwelling. I'm not sure, given the way this neighborhood has evolved with all of the higher density development around it, whether that would be the best location for a dwelling, and it would then occupy the property, and the opportunity to get some of that parking off the street would have been lost. So I think what's being proposed, even though as been testified to, with a number of the waivers that would apply to a normal situation, it's kind of making the best of a situation that's already tight. But I think that it overall will make the building and the parking lot will read together as one development and will function better because of the use that's being proposed for this 45 by 100-foot lot. This is really just to get into the master plan and to demonstrate, as we work towards the negative criteria, This particular portion of the professional office zone in the 2017 master plan and re-exam was recommended to be rezoned to R2, which would be 2 to 4 family. I think the master plan indicated that, and I think I've spoken on this in prior hearings, the original intent of that professional office zone back when the master plan was done in the 80s was to anticipate the conversion of some of the larger, older homes along Grand Avenue where institutional uses had already located, and anticipate that it would be preferable for them to be converted into professional offices than to be divided up into multifamily apartments. That actually ended up not coming to fruition. And I think the recognition in 2017 is that with the transformation of the city and the demand for residential development, that to rezone some of the professional office portions of the original zone made sense. And in this particular area, because it's specifically referenced as being near the central business district, the appropriate use that was recommended was the 2 to 4 family district. The point I'm bringing out is there's a specific reference to the more intense residential uses in closer proximity to the central business district. And probably since that master plan was done, that intensity of residential development has even become more evident with some of the brand new construction that's in the general area. The negative criteria I referenced before, the first problem is it shouldn't have any detrimental impact on the surrounding area. And I think right now, this vacant lot, the only impact that it's having is just a negative from a visual standpoint, but certainly with the improvement that will provide some of this parking off the street, it will have an overall benefit to the neighborhood, specifically with regard to providing for more public parking on the street. I would also point out that it's proximate to both the prime renewal area on 2 sides, to the east and the south, and those areas you're going to expect additional higher density, more intense residential uses. So that now an apartment building across from other high density, across the street and down the block from other higher density multifamily uses is certainly compatible, and the parking is a component of making that a better property and more desirable. And I think that's basically the fact in the third bullet, that relief of congestion in terms of parking congestion is a benefit on the general neighborhood. And then as far as the second prong of the negative criteria, the impact of the zone plan and ordinance, the board would determine that there would be no substantial impairment of the master plan and development standards. And I would say the fact that the building's been there since 1942 and is now part of an area that's transforming into a higher density area and away from the previous context of the area in the rehab portion of the waterfront redevelopment area is certainly consistent with what the master plan indicated about the rezoning of the PO to be compatible with more intense residential uses, and the accessory parking would help reduce the lack of parking for the pre-existing non-conforming residential apartment building. And then the conclusions, and to conclude, I think the non-conforming use of the apartment building in combination with the proposed parking will be a improvement that will benefit the general neighborhood and be consistent overall with the intent to go more towards a residential zoning and away from professional office zoning. So the fact that it's not permitted in the PO zone, I think will be mitigated by the fact that it will be rezoned, or at least recommended to be rezoned, to the 2 to 4 family zone. The grant of the use variance would advance at least 3 purposes of zoning. And as referenced before, the lot, I believe, is particularly suited for the parking use because of where it's located. And also the consistency with what's already taken place in the prime renewal area of the waterfront redevelopment plan on 2 sides. And the public welfare would be advanced by reducing parking congestion on the street. And then I'm making reference to the benefit to some of the uses, not only the church on the corner, but other uses in the immediate around the block that don't have parking on site and rely on public parking for their parking needs. And then it's consistent with the recommendation of the master plan to replace the POZ with R2. So I think those are the main general bullets. And I would just conclude that the board can grant both the D1 and the D2 for these reasons. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Consistent with that, C variances would also be warranted based upon your testimony. Am I correct? There'd be no damage or to the public good, no negative consequences. Am I correct?
Yes, as I said, I think the negative criteria would cover those 2 prongs, and certainly the reduction in parking congestion on the street is a huge benefit that I think will outweigh any detrimental impact of having a parking lot on that property, especially since the property itself is actually undersized for a conforming, even a conforming single-family lot.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I have no questions for you. I'll open it up to the board. Mr. Lewis, Russell, do you have any questions for Mr. Roberts?
I do not, thank you.
Brittany, do you have any questions for Mr. Roberts?
I do not.
Jill?
I don't have any questions, no, thank you.
Christopher?
No questions.
Catherine?
No questions for me, thank you.
And last but not least, Bonnie?
None here, thanks.
All right, and then I will now ask the board professionals, Jason and Donna, any questions for Mr. Roberts?
None for Jason.
Sorry, I was muted. Donna Miller. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Now looking to the general public, we will open it up for Mr. Roberts. Please keep to your questions regarding his testimony. Irina, do we have anybody in the public who wish to ask a question?
Yes, we have one person. I'm getting some feedback. Okay, let's try this again. Mr. Mignoli, please ask your question.
Yes, Ernest Mignoli, 400 Deal Lake Drive, Asbury Park. So I'm asking questions of is this still the engineer?
It is not. This is their planner.
Okay,
Mr.
the planner.
Mignoli, I do note that you were not here for part of this testimony, so you can only ask questions of the portion of the testimony that you heard this evening. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, for the planner. So we're talking about the parking lot, the application for a variance and the parking lot itself. I had a question for the planner. You referred to the fact of a church on the corner, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what's directly next to this property? Or is there a school there also?
There may be a school there as well, but the property is identified as a church on the tax maps.
I'm aware of that, but College Achieved School rents, I think, most of the church. And my question is, when you're talking about the impact on that street, I understand. Okay, you stated you stated. You know what?
Get to the question. Get to your question. Go.
Okay, sir. You stated that it's a benefit to the community to give those 11 spaces and 2 motorcycle spaces, correct?
What I said was providing the parking on the lot that's in question that requires the variance will have a benefit because the folks that would have been parking on the street that would be inhabitants or residents of this building competing with other members of the general public for those same parking spaces. At least 11 of them, plus the motorcycles now, can park off the street. And that is a definite benefit, especially in that area, that part of the city.
Okay, so then we're talking about a variance for the 11 spots based on 20 units, based on 1 car per unit. Is that correct as a planner?
Well, the building itself, if you were to apply today's standards to it, even though it was built in 1942 when there were no requirements, would require more than 11 spaces. I believe in the board planner's report, it mentioned that under city requirements, there would be 30 spaces required. The best that the applicant can do is originally 12, now 11, plus the motorcycle bay, which are that many more spaces than currently exist for the building today. So they're improving the situation by about a third of what a little bit more than a third of what the parking requirement would have been if they were to build the building today from scratch.
I agree with you. I just think, I thought you said that as a planner, you were working with a reference of 20 units with 1 car per unit as the requirement by the city. But I guess it's still, if you get the zoning variance, it's really 1.5 car. So I guess that will be 30, which you're planning to give 12, which is better than nothing for sure. And in that regard, it certainly benefits the community, like you say. So my question is, what that lot itself, you as the planner and the way it's described, that's going to be for that building only, correct? I mean, only tenants?
That's correct.
In other words, no one else could down the street like rent a spot there or anything.
No, actually, that would change the whole matter. It's being proposed, and the application before the board is as an accessory use to the existing Roosevelt apartment building. That means it's for the exclusive use of that building. If it were available to anyone to rent, it would become a primary use or a principal use, and that would also require a D1 variance, but that's not what's before the board this evening.
Okay. So we're talking rentals here or condos?
They're rental.
Beyond the
That's
scope of
irrelevant.
That was not what he testified.
So they're rentals. So my question is about the parking. Are you saying that when someone rents there, 12 people or 11 people and 2 motorcyclists are going to lottery or somehow get those spots? Is that correct?
Beyond the scope of the
Not part of his testimony, Mr. Manoli.
Okay. So how, as a planner, how will it be determined?
Not part of his testimony.
Okay. Let me move on. Okay. So then the other, let's just call it 1 car per unit, and let's say now you have 11, and there are the other cars there. I don't know how many you want to say there could be, and you said there's 26 spots on the street as a planner. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually showed 24 in my exhibit. I believe that it might have been 23, 12 on the side, on the north side, and 11 on the south side. It's certainly no more than 24, and most likely 23.
Okay, and as the planner, I guess you're aware. I think that's Zone 3, isn't it? Zone 3 parking, or is that Zone 4?
I can't tell you what zone the kiosks are based on, but the spaces are numbered.
No, well, they're not anymore, but I understand where you're coming from. So my question is, now that the city has some paid parking on that street, and I think they also offer residents of this building placards, like for living in a building. You can get a park on the street.
Is this a question?
Residential.
Where's the question? Where's the question?
Are the remaining people who don't have parking, do they have available to get a
objection?
Jack,
yearly?
that's not part of his testimony.
Gee whiz, unbelievable.
That's irrelevant to the variance.
Okay.
You're asking an irrelevant question anyway. So go ahead.
Relax, okay? Just relax.
No, don't tell me to do anything. I tell you,
No,
Ask your
okay.
questions, make them relevant, or we'll just mute you.
So, as the planner for this parking lot and this facility, are you aware that there are, I believe, 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m.
Not
3
part of
o'clock?
his testimony.
Okay.
It's irrelevant to the application.
Okay. Well, he is testifying as to.
I'm not going to argue with you. That's irrelevant to a relief that's been requested.
One more time, Mr. Manoli, and we will mute you.
Well, let me end with a comment then. I think you're all very.
No comments.
No comments.
You ask questions now, comments later, and comments have to be relevant to the application.
Questions because of
Are
the.
you finished, Mr. McNally, with your questions?
I am because of the tree.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't show anyone else in the public that has questions. Please continue.
I have no further witnesses. I'm ready to do my summation, which will be very brief, and I think we're all set.
Please proceed, Mr. Karras.
We've had 4 witnesses testify, including my client, with regard to the proposal to merge the 2 lots, add a parking which does not exist. I think we've made the case. We've submitted sufficient evidence to establish the need for it within the community and also to benefit the property. With that, I'll submit and take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Karras. So are we at this point now, Jack, to open it up for public comment?
Yes.
All right. So we allow 4 minutes for public comment. Arena, do we have anybody in the public who would like to comment on this application, either for or against?
Arena, you're muted.
Okay, Ms. Hull, I'm going to call on you. If you can please state your name and spell your last name, and Jack will swear you in. Go ahead.
Ms. Hall, please raise your right hand. I can't see you, but I'll take your word for it that you've done that. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please state your name for the record, spell it, and give us your address as well, please.
It's Judith Hull, Hull.
And you live next door, correct?
I do, 403. Yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
And
Okay.
Judith, before you begin, I'm sorry, I'm going to put a clock on the screen for 4 minutes. You have 4 minutes starting now. Please continue.
Okay. I strongly object, once again, safety, I object to the 2 spaces that they have right up against my fence. I have to strongly object to the parking lot plans because of the spaces right up against my fence in the back. If someone were tipsy and not good at parallel parking, they would pop over the curb and take out the vinyl fencing, wind up in my backyard, and possibly blow up my gas grill. Or worse, they might kill somebody. Also, the flimsy plastic fence they're proposing should at the very least be hardwood or possibly even concrete. What they are proposing is a dangerous cramming of too many cars in a tiny space and not nearly enough safety measures in place to protect my property and the occupants of it. There are no setbacks to stop a car from losing control and backing up into my house through the plastic flimsy fence. Please consider hardwood for safety's sake. I'm certain my homeowner's insurance will at the very least triple. Sewell Avenue has plenty of parking and is practically empty on weekdays. Yes, it is. The residents of the Roosevelt have been parking on Sewell Avenue for years. When I purchased and rehabbed my house at 403 Sewell Avenue in 2012, I had to abide by the zoning laws as far as setbacks and anything else was concerned. I ask that the zoning board take the surrounding residents' quality of life into consideration before modifying the existing rules and regulations. On a side note, there are beautiful trees in the back of that lot. I don't know if you're just going to cut them down or not. Hope you don't. But so that I appreciate you redoing the. I don't even mind the parking lot. It's just too close, and I don't think it's well thought out yet. I think it could be, but I think that there's just too many spaces jammed in there, and I think that talking about cars having to back out of it is even worse when there's just a plastic fence there. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't sound like a good idea to me. But that's all I have to say. I'm glad that you're fixing the building and rehabbing it. And I always figured a parking lot might be there, but I think that there's just too many spaces. It's jam-packed and it's not thought through, at least where I'm concerned, the neighbor. So that's all I have to say, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Okay, just one moment. Now I will call on Mr. Magnoli. Again, please state your name, and I will put 4 minutes on the clock and let you know when to begin.
I have to swear him in.
Go ahead.
Ernest Mignoli.
Mr. Mignoli, please raise your right hand. Do you
I am.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your address for the record and proceed.
400 Deal Lake Drive, Santander, apartment 5D, Asbury Park, New Jersey. So I believe that the parking lot, with the increasing lack of permeability, meaning it's going to be impervious to the footprint of the whole joining of the two lots, I don't agree with the engineering speculations and how that water is going to be dealt with. And one of my concerns is the fact that when you look at the building, and it is a classic building, and yes, things have changed, but if you look at the drainage, it's a slant roof. A lot of the water from the roof goes off to the back of the property and saturates as much permeable land around the building. I think that's why it was that way. And when you start to talk about storms and the fact of how it'll drain and the safety measures, I didn't feel that engineering-wise that it's going to accomplish that. Because, I mean, I live here. I see horrible storms, 2, 3, 4 inches of water at a time come through in 30 minutes with strong winds. And, you know, the neighbor now, with that impermeability, I mean, what's to stop the wind from not just possibly bringing cars into her home, but water and sheets of water and then icing up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is, so the draining is a big problem, and I do believe that it should be joined by that sewer to the city property, because I think with that footprint of impermeability, it's never going to withstand the heavy flash rains that we get, especially since all the increased impermeability that's going on right around that property. The big project on the corner of, what is it, on Heck and Cookman and Asbury. I mean, all this impermeability, we're losing grass, we're losing soft ground, we're losing places for rain to sink in. So it's going to cascade. It's going to go in all different places. And if each place doesn't join to the sewer system for those times, that water is going to go and it's going to do damages somewhere. And from Sewell, it could even wind up in the Wesley Lake for sure, because once it's hit the slope of Heck, it's headed down to the Wesley Lake. So I also believe that comments made about the property, that it's vacant, the only work going on there is a demo on the inside on some walls that were water saturated. I go by there all the time. There's people working on the facade. They're grinding. There's dust flying all over the place. I don't know if there's any EPA permits, but they're working without masks and stuff. So the comment that there's been no work going on there, I mean, I'm by there all the time. There's always work going on there. And then the driveway. I don't know where that driveway came from, but they're using it, the workers, to go in the driveway and park up on the grass. And I don't think that's allowed, but it's been going on for a long time. So I think there's been a lot of work going on in this building without the city knowing about it, especially on the outside, the facade. I mean, that's heavy grinding, and you could see plumes of dust. It's a 1942 building. It's loaded with asbestos, loaded with lead. It's probably loaded with mold and mildew, and there's no skirting around the building, and that flies around. And again, I feel for this poor neighbor, because it's not just water and cars coming at you. It's all those plumes of all that toxic stuff. I mean, that's got to be accounted for. I mean, that's critical to that neighborhood to join that building in a way that it's refurbished, and it should be, but it should be not by variance and making statements.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Magnoli. Your time is up.
Do we have anybody else, Irina, in the audience, or in the general public, rather?
No, I don't show any other members of the public.
All right. So that closes the general public comment section, and we can move on to discussion among the board itself. Unless you have anything left to add, Mr. Karras, we will do that.
You know.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to ask the board for their comments, how they feel about this application and the amendments we've made to it already. I'll start off with you, Russell.
Thank you. This is a unique situation. While I don't think it's ideal on a lot of levels, I do appreciate that the applicant is trying to provide as much off-street parking as possible. I think everyone can agree that parking is a huge problem. The only thing that's really been kind of bugging me a little bit are those two parallel spaces, and I know we have gotten rid of one of them, but I have to agree with Ms. Hull here. And considering that she is the neighbor next door, the single parallel space that's sort of hanging out there just doesn't really seem to fit for me. So I would suggest that we approve 10 spaces for them and try and give Mrs. Hull as much security and peace of mind as possible. When it comes to the fencing, I have more of a problem with that 2-foot space between the two fences than I do necessarily a barrier for cars to go through. But I do think alleviating that one parallel space hanging out there kind of makes sense to me. As far as drainage and all of that stuff, I'm gonna leave that to our professionals who I think can handle that very well for us. But other than that, it's really just that single parallel space that's kind of sticking out for me right now.
Thank you, Russell. Brittany, how about you?
So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been rereading the planning and engineering report. Ultimately, we have to decide if this site's going to accommodate the problems associated with the higher density. And I started asking about the drainage, and the fact that it's designed for a 2% flood really means that there's a 50% chance that a 2-year storm will happen each year, which, as it's been said many times in this meeting, that the storms are getting worse and the flooding's getting worse. And I am very concerned about taking a property that is 6% covered right now and covering it with impervious surface of 84. I understand that eventually there will be something that will be built here, but I think that I don't think the site can support this development. It's been testified that once the 2% flood hits, that drainage is going to go into the street. I think unless they agree to tie into the stormwater infrastructure that Jason suggested, I'm not comfortable approving this.
Thank you, Brittany. Jill.
Yes, I have to echo Russell and Brittany's sentiments. The 2 spaces are troubling. The water, as Brittany so eloquently has placed it. So I'm just going to echo those 2 statements. Those are not sitting well with me. And that's the only comments I have.
Thank you. Christopher.
I only have a problem actually with the space in the corner. So in one side there's 10 spaces and in the other side there's 2 that are parallel park. Especially with the light pole that is going to be right there in the center. I don't know how that car is gonna go in or out. Now, I used to live in a property that actually everybody used to back up to get the cars out, and we never had a problem with it. People driving sometimes does stupid things, and I have seen it in my business actually, that a woman thought that she was going backwards and instead she went forward and went through my fence. I don't think a wooden fence or a plastic fence right next to the next property, I think is appropriate. I think a cement or a wall will protect the house right next to it. That's my only concern.
Thank you, Christopher. Catherine, do you have any comments regarding this application?
My 2 comments are, I feel exactly the same way as Russell does about the parking along the fence. I think this should be eliminated. My personal problem with the fence is aesthetically. I think I don't personally like a white vinyl fence. I don't think it's a thoughtful design. I don't think a wood fence is going to be of any better structure if there was to be an accident. I do think that some kind of decorative concrete block should be considered and incorporated, maybe that in conjunction with a wood fence. But I think that the design is very thoughtless. I think it's just putting up a white vinyl fence. I just don't think it goes with, you've talked a lot about the character of the building, restoring it back to its former glory, and I don't think that includes a white vinyl fence whatsoever. So I think the mark is missed there. Those would be my 2 comments.
Thank you, Kitty. And Bonnie, do you have any comments regarding this application?
I definitely agree with those 2 parallel spots. They're just trying to cram in as much parking as they could, understandably, but I just don't see backing out in that the back left spots, how that can go well. My only other comment is the fence. Yeah, I don't think a wood fence, as she suggested, is going to stop a car from going through. I definitely think something a lot heavier. I don't know if she's mentioned wood for the aesthetics. I don't know if they maybe want to do a wood fence for her on her side and then just something a little bit more solid and heavier on their side so that she doesn't have to see it. A concrete block or concrete isn't really very aesthetically pleasing, so I doubt she wants to really look at that from her second floor. But other than that, I don't have any other comments.
Thank you, Bonnie. So, Mr. Karras, you've heard a lot of comments out of the board.
Yeah, if I can respond. Yeah, in terms of the parking spaces, that's up to the board. If they want to eliminate the 2, that's, it's a site plan application. The board can do that in any resolution. In terms of the drainage, we prefer, obviously, to do as we had suggested and we provided for. But again, it's the board's determination. If they want to go with a tie-in, that's up to the board. In terms of you can't do concrete in terms of a wall because it's not fencing. You can't put concrete up. It brings up all different other zoning issues because that essentially becomes a structure. In terms of fencing, I mean, it's common to have fencing. If you want to talk about wooden fencing as opposed to vinyl, we're fine with that. Or a different type of fencing. But a concrete wall, number 1, I think would be ugly, and I don't think it's warranted. And number 2, I don't think you're permitted to do in zone because essentially you're creating a structure by putting concrete up. I don't think I've seen a concrete wall that acts as a fence. You have cars in parking lots all the time where they back up and they turn. You have driveways that are immediately adjacent to one another. You have driveways that are adjacent to a house. You know, do accidents happen every once in a while? Yeah, but if somebody's going to drive drunk, number one, it's illegal. And I don't think you take into account the illegality of somebody that's going to be driving drunk when you're trying to design something. We live in a world where things do happen. We can't provide for every eventuality. So we'd never get into a car and drive down the street. Somebody can be driving down the street and crash into you. Unfortunately, that's a world we live in. But we have to design things that are realistic. And I don't think a concrete wall is realistic. The other things I'll leave up to the board in terms of eliminating the 2 parking spaces, try to come up with a design that maximizes the amount of parking on the site. The 1 additional parking space is parallel. It's not adjacent to the property that's up against the property line. It's parallel. I don't see how it would go into the house, to be honest with you. If anything, you're concerned about a car backing up and going into the house, car parked in a parallel space here would prevent it. Would act as, in a sense, a concrete wall prevent a space from preventing a car from going back into the house.
But I think you realize, Mr. Karras, that we have to be sensitive to the next door neighbor.
100%, and I fully expect that. But if you have a fence there and you have a car parked there, you're not going to see it. But I'll leave that up to the board if the board wants to eliminate that space and also change the composition of the fence and the drainage. You know, that's the board's purview to determine whether or not they want to do better, not better, but different drainage as recommended by the board engineer tying in, eliminate the space. But in terms of the fence, I don't see how it's realistic to do a concrete wall that would look good, be beneficial to the neighborhood or to the neighbor.
I'd like to make a comment about the concrete wall. I'd like to just clarify, I did not say a concrete wall. I said decorative concrete block, maybe considered with, in conjunction with wood or shrubbery, or there's a million ways you can design where it's not an actual wall building. I'm not talking about building a wall around like a basement, you know, concrete block wall. There are ways to do it. In my opinion, it is a thoughtless design to just put up. You guys were going on about bringing this building back to its glory. That does not, in my eyes, doesn't really include a vinyl fence. I think there are other ways to do some kind of fencing, and maybe a concrete block at the base to help protect the house next door. That's what, I mean, I don't want to get into designing elevations here, but that's what my point was.
Well, that's what the curb does. You have the curb there to act as a barrier, also as testified by Mr. Kachuba. How high would you want to go with concrete? I mean, there gets to a point where you have to look at a practical design.
Architect to come up with options. That's what a design architect does.
Well, it's engineering. It's engineering at this point, what's going to go in there.
This is Donna Miller, and I could speak to this matter. Just as your engineer and architect have designed a brick-clad, low retaining wall for your accessible ramp, a similar design could be used as a screening wall, which we often do or recommend around parking lots. However, there isn't sufficient room between the curb line and the property line to construct an actual wall. The zoning permits such a wall 4 feet high, but it needs to be 1 foot off the property line. So if we try and, squeeze a masonry wall, a brick wall into that space, it's going to reduce the size of the drive aisle or reduce the size of the parking spaces, neither of which, we want to do. The consensus is that it's tight enough already. We don't need to constrain it further. So while I agree with the members who are saying, maybe fencing is a little insufficient as far as aesthetic, and it's not really appeasing the neighbor. A brick-clad masonry wall could be suitable However, in order to construct it, it doesn't appear, and Jason, if you want to chime in, I think there's only like 1.5 feet between the curb line and the property line, and that's really going to be too tight to make sure that a properly built wall, stays entirely on the subject property and not constrain the drive aisle or the parking spaces.
Yeah, there are other types of fencing we can do. There is, wood picket fencing. That's nice. That's closed. There's different types of fencing that we could do, which would be able to be accommodated on that site. That's not necessarily a vinyl fence. So design-wise, we can work. I mean, a vinyl fence, a common fence that you see now, they wear well, and it's come within the area. You see a lot of them in Asbury Park. But we could go with a different type of fencing. Fine.
This is Donna again, and I'm just going to mention, and the chair, I'm sure, will recall, as part of our design standards zoning amendments, we are prohibiting vinyl for fence material in the future. Section 3063.1 shows the types of fences that are permitted. Board on board, the composite stockade with the what do you call it, lattice top are all, they're a variety.
I'm fine with that, and I happen to like the stockade with the lattice top. I think that would look nice.
And I do, agree that it would be nice that it complements the existing building, which is tricky because of the brick design. But maybe we don't lean too heavily on the white vinyl.
Yeah, it's fine. A stockade with the whatever you call it up top is fine. It's a nice looking fence. We can do something like that.
So personally, Mr. Karras, I have a problem with the 2 parking spaces that are parallel. As I mentioned in the beginning of our, when we first started. And I also feel that we need to tie into the city infrastructure. So if Mr. Siegel is amenable to those situations, I don't know that he is, but if he's amenable to doing it.
Hold on.
Is that a question or is that a hypothetical? Is that a question?
Well, you can see the board is very concerned about the stormwater hitting this impervious area, right?
I see that.
And they're also very concerned about those 2 parallel spaces that are up against the neighbor's property, Mr. Siegel. So, I
Chris,
don't.
the answer to the question. Sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off, Chris. The answer to the question is I do see that concern, and I am more than happy to work with the city and the board and appease the board and tie into the property across the street and eliminate the 2 parallel spaces. I tried to put my best foot forward with the proposal for 12 spaces, and I thought that was solving for a significant need that existed. You'd rather.
I understand, Mr. Siegel, and I know you're trying to provide some off-street parking, which is definitely appreciated in this environment where parking is very difficult now in town. But overall, we have to be concerned about your neighbor to the east, who is very concerned about those parking spaces there, and rightly so. She's concerned about her basement getting flooded.
So we're willing to then, as indicated by Mr. Siegel, willing to concede on the 2 parking spaces and the drainage.
Yes, willing to concede.
And Peter, with regard to the fence, you can do a picket fence, something a little different than the white vinyl.
Willing to abandon white vinyl in favor of whatever it is that you guys want me to do. Really, I doesn't need to be white vinyl. I actually would prefer to do something different now after hearing everyone's comments. So, we won't do white vinyl. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel.
What I'd like to do is, if I may, what I'd like to do, if I may use this opportunity, since I'm speaking now, just to say I would like to hopefully, and I hope and pray and cross my fingers, hopefully be able to move forward after this hearing tonight that we've all now been on for over 3 hours, which I thank everybody for. I know you all do this as a public service. I'd like to be able to move forward and consummate this project and move forward with the project. It's been a couple of years, and you know, I think it's time for me to try and get this thing going here. So,
Well,
you know,
we've
the
got the
fence
drain.
fine, the drainage fine, the parking space is fine.
Can we agree upon a fence design? Is a picket fence, does that work, the stockade?
I believe one of the board members has something to add, Mr. Karas. Catherine, do you want to add something to this discussion?
No, that was from my comment.
Oh, okay.
I made my comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, please proceed, Mr. Karas.
No, just, I'm trying to get to a fence design. Instead of the white vinyl, it was mentioned the stockade fence. Does that work with everybody? Russ has a thumbs up.
I personally like a wood fence, whether it's cedar or, I'm not a big fan of the white vinyl, Mr. Karas, only because over time, it really looks terrible. It develops mold and.
Yeah, we'll do a wooden stockade fence.
With a lattice.
Perfect.
Okay. Is everybody agreeable to that on the board?
Yep, I agree if our board professionals think it's okay. I don't know fences. So if yeah, Donna and Jason are okay with it, I am.
I have no issue with that.
Thank you. Good. Catherine, does that do it for you? Okay, great. Thank you.
So that being said, Mr. Serpico, can you review all the amendments that?
Before we get to that, we need to, Mr. Siegel testified, we need to open him up to cross of his testimony.
Of course.
Limited to his
limited to what he just said, of course.
Okay. All right, so first we'll start with the board members. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Siegel?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Siegel.
None here, thank you.
No, not at all. Thanks.
None, thank you.
None for me.
All right, it looks like we're pretty much in agreement that way. Any further questions from the board professionals, Donna or Jason?
No, pass.
No, thank you.
All right, Irina, we'll have to open it up to the general public again for Mr. Siegel.
Okay, Mr. Magnoli, please ask your question.
Do I have to be sworn in or anything?
No, you're asking the
Just a
question.
Okay, okay, okay.
Limited in scope.
Ernest McNulty, Torrenfield Lake Drive.
Limited in your question questions must be limited in scope to what he just testified to, not beyond that.
Go ahead.
And I'm asking Mr. Siegel. Okay, Mr. Siegel, the stockade fence that you're referring to, would that satisfy the neighbor's concern that if a car, God forbid, was out of control?
Objection. He can't testify as to what the neighboring concern is.
Objection sustained, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I can't ask a question about the stockade fence?
Yes,
That's
not that question.
Not that question.
Right.
Oh, okay. So the stockade fence, can you just describe it to me? I don't know what you mean. It's made out of cedar and
made out of wood. It's a stockade fence made out of wood with a lattice design on top.
Okay, and you conceded that to the board, I guess, in lieu of what the neighbor was talking about.
I'm going to object if that's a question.
No.
Okay. Go
ahead, ask another question.
Okay. Mr. Siegel, is there a chance that you could come up with something stronger?
No.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay. or you or your engineer or architect, you can't come up with anything stronger than.
You already
Objection,
answered
that's been asked
that
and answered.
question. Move on to the
You
next
have
question.
another question?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't show any other members of the public with their hand raised. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Manoli. Mr. Karas, please, well, actually, let's take it back to Mr. Serpico. Can you review all the
Yeah,
changes that
yeah,
we?
okay. Let's talk about the most recent changes. The plans would be amended to one, exclude the 2 parallel spaces. 2, change a submission of a new engineering design for water treatment, runoff, and the like, per Jason's recommendation to tie into the city main.
That's correct.
3, new plans showing a revised fence to exclude the vinyl, keep the same height dimensions that you were going to have before, but it would be a wood stockade fence with the appropriate lattice work up above.
Correct.
And a number of my conditions would be based on a number of the comments that were made by the engineer that were essentially agreed to by the engineer regarding the fencing. Okay, so we've already taken care of that. Things have changed here. Compliance with the outstanding conditions and recommendations of the board's engineer's report. Compliance with the majority of what Donna's report speaks about. I don't have the specific issues that were addressed during the testimony, but Andy went through it. I can always review the testimony.
It would be things like the wheel stops. And
Yes, the wheel stops, those things of that nature. The one thing that was brought up, a trash enclosure is another one. I put a condition that building personnel are responsible for taking the trash in and out on days, and recycling and all that, the usual standard stuff. There was some talk about a bicycle rack that could possibly be put back in the back. I don't know where that went to. I assume that's what's going to take place, that a bicycle rack is going to be installed back there as per Joe's testimony.
That's fine.
Is that correct?
And don't forget about the lighting, Jack.
Yeah.
The lighting
Yes, and that's all in the comments by the engineer, where Donna and Jason were questioning him regarding the lighting fixtures to be more appropriate to the architectural style of the building, that are going to be affixed to the building, the changes in the lighting fixtures in the parking lot to exclude any spillover onto contiguous property owners. Same photometric situation, documentation to be supplied to Donna for all the lighting fixtures, whether it's building or parking lot.
Yeah, and the plantings in the ROW will go back
Yeah,
before the mayor and council.
subject to any encroachments in the right of way being approved by the mayor and city council. The usual, that sort of thing. So that's what I basically have.
And the tree planting would be honey locust, I believe, for the street. Is that what we agreed to?
Yeah, we're fine with that.
All right, Donna, make a note of that so that when I do the resolution, you'll remind me of that just in case. Okay. Yeah, usually I run these certainly by Donna and Jason to make sure that we have all the technical aspects covered, besides.
All right. I appreciate that, Mr. Serpico. So based on all of those recommendations and changes, I will make a motion to.
Jason's raising his hand like a good Catholic schoolboy. Go ahead.
Up.
Jack, I'll like we always do, we'll collaborate after the fact tomorrow, another day, make sure we get all the conditions. But one is on my mind as we're talking about it. A mounting analysis is to be provided for.
Yes. Yes. See, I didn't write that down.
We've agreed to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jason. So with that said, I will make a motion to approve the use variance and the application for
Design waivers and bulk waivers.
For what is it, 407 Sewell or
It's
405?
405 through 409. And with the merge, don't forget a merge of the two lots also.
Yeah, let me see if I can help you, Christopher. I'm sorry for the interruption, but maybe I can help you move along. You got 2 use variances. You got a number of pre-existing bulk variances that will confirm or nonconformities that we'll confirm. The design waivers requested as amended. Some of them may have changed, some of them may have gone away. And the bulk variances for the parking, instead of 12, it'll be 10.
Correct.
And merger of the lots into one lot consolidation, because you can't separate these two uses.
There was also a comment regarding the setbacks that we should.
Yeah, I'll include everything in CCH report as amended tonight as part of the approvals, bulk
Okay.
waivers, merger, that sort of thing.
So with that, I'll make a motion to approve. All said.
This is Russell Lewis. I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Christopher Avalone and a second by Russell Lewis. I will take roll now. Sorry, I lost my paper.
I can do it if you.
It's late. It's late.
If you need help, I'll do it for you. It's no problem.
Sorry, it fell down.
Okay.
All right. Brittany Ashman,
Yes.
Christopher Gonzalez,
Yes.
Joe Potter,
Yes.
Catherine Minervini,
Yes.
Bonnie Neck,
Yes.
Russell Lewis,
Yes.
and Christopher Avalone.
Thank goodness, yes.
Thank you. Application approved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Nice work,
just saying
everyone.
yes.
Nice job. Nice work. Nice work.
All right. Good seeing everybody. Glad to see
You
everybody
too.
well and
Take
healthy.
care, Andy.
All right, we'll talk.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
That will-
Good evening.
Aye.
And can we get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll
I'll
second.
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 All right, I have a motion by Christopher Avalone, a second by Brittany Ashman. All in favor?
You
Aye.
bet.
Thank you.
Night, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.